Chapter 2041. Boom. A loud explosion shook the heavens and endless blue flames lit up the sky. A mass of dazzling and magnificent ice blue flames blotted out the sky and blotted out the sky. It was like the brightest star in the sky and the most beautiful fireworks in a festival. However, it was formed by Luo Li's soul. No matter how dazzling it was sad and sorrowful, and it made one's heart clench. Even though Ji Tianqing had a strong will, seeing Luo Li explode and die with his own eyes still made him feel sad. Thinking back to the words he had said to anger Luo Li, he felt guilty. The resolute words that Luo Li had said before she blew herself up still lingered in his mind, not dissipating for a long time. Yun Yao's eyes stared at the blue flames in the sky, and her body started to tremble. Her face was as white as a sheet and 2 drops of tears rolled down her cheeks. Deep sorrow filled her mind and caused her heart to ache. All sorts of memories surfaced in her mind. When she had just arrived at the Luotian mountain, she was in an unfamiliar environment and she was sad and lonely. It was Luo Li who came to her side, accompanied her and helped her. All kinds of scenes, including Luo Li's frown, smile and words, were still vivid in her mind. But now they were separated forever and they would never be able to see each other again. Swoosh. The flames from Luo Li's explosion spread in all directions. The icy blue shockwave had the power to destroy everything, and it swept across a radius of a few thousand miles. Seeing the shockwave, Ji Tianqing was shocked. He hurriedly pulled Yun Yao away from the wreckage of the divine battleship and flew toward the quicksand. The black sand poured down from the black hole like a flood and entered the wreckage of the divine battleship. If they wanted to escape back to the ghost desert, they could only go against the flow and pass through the black hole. Swoosh. Ji Tianqing hugged the heartbroken Yun Yao tightly, passed through the black sand and entered the black hole. When the destructive icy blue shockwave engulfed the wreckage of the divine battleship, the 2 of them had already disappeared. In the next moment, the 2 of them passed through the black hole and returned to the ghost desert. Shwa. A ball of dazzling golden light wrapped tightly around Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao as it flew out of the black sand vortex. Yun Yao was already an arrow at the end of its flight, unable to protect herself. Passing through the spatial black hole, one would have to endure the attacks of the spatial crack and the power of the void. It was Ji Tianqing who used his dermic powers to form a shield to protect him and Yun Yao, allowing them to pass through the black hole smoothly. Even though he succeeded, his vitality was greatly damaged and his injuries became even more severe. Fortunately, he and Yun Yao had finally escaped from the void and were out of danger. However, before he could see the scene around him clearly, he heard bursts of exclamations and shouts. Oh my God! He actually managed to escape back. It's Ji Tianqing. He's Ji Tianqing. What are you waiting for? Kill him. The great demon saint has ordered us to tear this man into pieces. We must not let him go. Shouts of shock and excitement sounded around the vortex one after another. Ji Tianqing immediately recognized that those were the voices of many powerful demon clan cultivators. He raised his head and looked around. Only then did he see the situation around him clearly. He saw dozens of powerful demon clan cultivators standing around the black sand vortex with a radius of hundreds of miles. There were more than a dozen tribulation stage cultivators wearing black armor and holding swords and dharma treasures. There were also more than a dozen ferocious and ever-changing blood gods illusions. In addition, there were more than 20 demonic beasts that were as large as mountains and had ferocious and violent auras. Whether it was the powerful demon clan cultivators, blood gods illusions or demonic beasts, they all stared at him excitedly, their eyes full of bloodthirsty murderous intent. There was no need for anyone to give an order. All the powerful demon clan cultivators and blood gods illusions used powerful secret techniques to besiege him. Suddenly, overwhelming bloody light, demonic chi and dharma spell shadows drowned Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao like a monstrous flood. Both of them were seriously injured. It was not easy for them to escape from the void, but they were besieged by so many powerful demon clan cultivators. They were in imminent danger and their lives were at stake. However, Ji Tianqing had known that the great demon saint had brought a large number of powerful cultivators with him, so he was prepared. When the dharma spell shadows fell from the sky, he held the seriously injured Yun Yao in his left arm and waved his right hand to release a sky full of thunderbolts. 5-colored divine thunderbolts. The 5-colored thunderbolts with the power to annihilate everything penetrated the bloody light in the sky and scattered around the black sand vortex. Suddenly, several powerful demon clan cultivators were hit by the thunderbolts and turned into black ashes on the spot. Their bodies and souls were destroyed. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ji Tianxing took Yun Yao through the huge hole, rushed out of the black sand vortex, and escaped from the encirclement of the demon clan cultivators. Many powerful demon clan cultivators reacted immediately and chased after them. However, Ji Tianxing had already summoned the black dragon. Swoosh! The black dragon carried him and Yun Yao and flew across the sky at lightning speed. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared into the gray clouds. Dozens of powerful demon clan cultivators chased desperately for thousands of miles, but they completely lost track of the black dragon and could only return empty-handed. The power of Luo Li's self-destruction was, of course, extremely terrifying. The icy blue shockwave was enough to destroy thousands of miles of heaven and earth. Any living being below the Saint Realm would not be able to survive. However, no matter how powerful the shockwave was, it could not destroy the wreckage of the divine ship, nor could it damage the golden light seal of the Five Elements world. The shockwave hit the golden light seal, but it was blocked and quickly dissipated. After a long time, the icy blue flames that covered thousands of miles of the void gradually disappeared. The void returned to silence once more, leaving no trace behind as if nothing had happened. Luo Li had also completely disappeared, leaving not even a speck of dust behind. Thousands of miles away from the wreckage of the divine ship, in the empty void, a figure floated quietly. It was the great demon saint who was seriously injured and unconscious. The red robe and armor that he was wearing as well as his long hair had all disappeared. His body, which was covered with black dragon scales, was also covered with dense cracks and thousands of drops of demon blood seeped out. At this moment he was like a porcelain bowl that was covered with cracks and would shatter with a touch. However, his injuries were not limited to this. Not only was his physical body on the verge of collapse, but his soul was also seriously injured and he was unconscious. He had lost consciousness and was like a leaf, a piece of black paper quietly floating in the void. After an unknown period of time, perhaps half a month, perhaps a month, finally the great demon saint's eyelids moved and he gradually opened his eyes. Damn bitch. She did not hesitate to self-destruct to injure me, how hateful. His lips moved and he muttered in a venomous tone. Then he slowly sat up, took out a pile of black, purple and red elixirs and consumed them. After a few days of cultivation he had recovered some of his vitality and he flew back leisurely. When he returned to the wreckage of the divine ship, he was stunned when he saw that it was not damaged at all, and there was not even a trace left behind. What kind of metal is this? It withstood the power of a martial saint's self-destruction, and it was not damaged at all. Chapter 2042. When he had first arrived in the void, the great devil saint's attention had been focused on Ji Tianxing. At that time he had only glanced at the remains of the divine battleship and had not paid much attention to it. Now that the matter had passed, the remains of the divine battleship had endured a great battle and been swept away by the shockwaves from Luo Li's self-destruction, but there were no traces of it left behind. This had attracted the great devil saint's attention. He stood on the remains of the divine battleship and carefully observed it for a long time, even using his divine sense to scan it dozens of times. In the end he could tell that it was the remains of a treasure. Furthermore, the shape and style of this treasure were not found in the Shenwu continent. He was certain that this was a high-grade treasure that had come from beyond the heavens. Even if it was just a treasure, the materials used to make it were extraordinary, far surpassing the various refining materials of the Shenwu continent. This is definitely a divine-grade refining material. Can definitely be used to refine a divine weapon. Such a rare treasure has actually been encountered by me. How can I miss it? The great devil saint stared at the remains of the divine battleship with a burning gaze, feeling rather excited. Although I was unable to kill that bastard Ji Tianxing, I was able to force Luo Li to self-destruct, and I was even able to pick up the remains of a divine weapon. This can be considered as making up for my regrets. With this thought in mind, the great devil saint's regret and frustration at not being able to kill Ji Tianxing was greatly diluted. He could not wait to use his secret technique, releasing 4 enormous black dragon claws that could cover the sky and drag the remains of the divine battleship away. In his mind, it was just the remains of a divine weapon that had lost all of its divine power, so it should be easy for him to capture it. However, he did not expect that no matter how much force he used, the remains of the divine battleship would not budge. Unwilling to give up, he used other secret techniques to try and move the remains of the divine battleship. However, the results were the same. The divine sword remains were firmly embedded in the five elements world and could not be moved at all. I don't believe it. It's just a mystical remnant that has lost all of its divine power. How can it not be moved? The great devil saint frowned and his face turned purple from anger. Over the next 2 days he tried all sorts of methods to move the remains of the divine weapon. He did not even hesitate to use a saint artifact to try and pull it out. However, everything he did was in vain. The divine artifact remains were incomparably sturdy, as if they had become one with the five elements world. 2 days later, the great demon saint had no choice but to give up and leave. Damn it! I can only look at the remains of the divine artifact with my own eyes, but I can't take it for myself. How infuriating! No, wait until I return to the North Underworld Mountain, I'll think of another way. If I can't do anything about it, I'll report this matter to Lord Demon God. He'll definitely have a way. With that thought in mind, the great demonic saint also passed through the black sand and entered the spatial hole. Shwa. In the next moment, the great demon saint escaped from the void and returned to the space above the black sand vortex. Around the whirlpool, there were still a few demon race experts guarding it. Seeing the great demonic saint appear, everyone immediately surrounded him and bowed respectfully. The great demon saint looked around, frowned and asked, "Where are the others? Where did they all go? That bastard Zhi Tianxing, have you caught him yet?" The few demon clan experts trembled in fear, stammering and not daring to answer. "Are all of you deaf?" The great demon saint had a bad premonition, so he pointed at one of the demon race experts and shouted, "You tell me." The demon race expert who was pointed out could only answer truthfully, reporting to Lord Demon Saint, "That bastard Zhi Tianxing has escaped from our encirclement and is nowhere to be seen. The others have spread out and are searching for Zhi Tianxing's whereabouts." The great demon saint frowned fiercely, his eyes flashed with killing intent and said angrily, "It's just as I expected. He really escaped. Damn bastard, he actually managed to escape from our encirclement with such heavy injuries." After this incident, the great demon saint finally understood how difficult it was to deal with Zhi Tianxing. He glared at the few demon race experts and scolded them harshly, "You bunch of trash, what use do I have for you? Send a message to the others, tell them to get back here, I want to punish them severely." The few demon race experts were filled with fear, and their bodies were trembling in fear, but they quickly nodded and agreed. Unknowingly, a month had passed. In the evening, the Black Dragon carried Zhi Tianxing and Yun Yao back to Luotian Mountain. Ever since Zhi Tianxing left, he had not returned for more than 2 years. However, the tall, majestic and sacred Luotian Mountain did not change much and still looked the same as before. The setting sun shone and the afterglow was golden, creating a peaceful scene. The Luotian Mountain was surrounded by white clouds, and the golden light was faintly discernible, adding to the sacred aura. Zhi Tianxing stood on the back of the dragon, looking down at the Luotian Mountain in front of him, and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Ever since he escaped from the black sand vortex, he rode the black dragon and left the North Underworld Mountain without stopping, rushing back to the Luotian kingdom. Yun Yao was seriously injured and it almost affected Yaya and Qinchin in her womb. Zhi Tianxing was worried about her and the 2 children's safety, so he let her enter the sword world, and she had been in seclusion to heal her injuries. He did not rush back to Tianzhu Mountain, and went straight back to Luotian Mountain for Yun Yao's safety. After all, Tianzhu Mountain was not far from North Underworld Mountain, and it was not safe. If the great demon saint wanted to kill him, he would definitely chase after him and it would be very dangerous. Luotian Mountain was located in the hinterland of the Luotian kingdom, and it was the safest place. Moreover, Yun Yao not only had to go into seclusion to heal her injuries, but she also had to refine the Earth's spirit divine pearl as soon as possible. Only by staying at Luotian Mountain would he be most at ease. Zoosh. The black dragon passed through layers of clouds and landed on the peak of Luotian Mountain. Zhi Tianxing had just returned to the Cloud Water Palace, and the golden dragon and black eagle came up to him and bowed respectfully. "Greetings, young Master Zhi." Zhi Tianxing waved his hand, indicating that the two could dispense with the formalities, and quickly rushed back to Yun Yao's room. The black eagle hurriedly followed and asked with concern, Young master, why did you suddenly come back? Where's master? Is she not with you? Ji Tianxing calmly explained, don't worry, Yao Yao came back with me and she is fine. Black Eagle, quickly go and report to Granny Long that I have something to discuss with her. The Black Eagle naturally did not dare to delay and hurriedly replied, yes, and turned to leave. Ji Tianxing walked around the room and saw that Yun Yao's room was as clean as ever, and the windows were bright and clean. He could not help but reveal a gratified expression. At least during the time when he was not at Luotian Mountain, no one dared to neglect Yun Yao, and they would serve her wholeheartedly. He opened the sword world and summoned Yun Yao. Swoosh! A white light flashed and Yun Yao appeared in the room. She had already changed into a tidy moon-white dress, and her hair was meticulously combed, looking as ethereal as before. After a month of seclusion to recuperate, her injuries had already recovered by 80%, and there were no major problems. Her complexion had also returned to normal and no one could tell that she was injured. However, her eyes were a little dim and there was a hint of worry in her eyes and her heart was heavy. Chapter 2043. Ji Tianxing could see that Yun Yao was in a heavy mood, so he tried to comfort her. Yao Yao, the dead are gone. Don't wallow in sorrow and blame yourself anymore. Luo Li was the Divine Master's most trusted and valued divine official. She was also loyal to the Divine Master and swore to serve him with her life. The Divine Master ordered her to accompany you to find the Divine Orb and protect you. She sacrificed herself to protect us. This was not only because of your sisterly love, but also because of her loyalty to the Divine Master. What we need to do is not wallow in sorrow and blame ourselves. We need to pull ourselves together and find a way to avenge her. Ji Tianxing was the person who understood Yun Yao the most. He could see that Yun Yao blamed herself for Luo Li's death. In fact, he also felt a little guilty but he never showed it. However, he was calmer and would not act on impulse. He knew that Luo Li had died for her loyalty and she had no regrets. The most important thing for him and Yun Yao to do was to kill the great demon saint and avenge Luo Li. Yun Yao remained silent and only nodded. Ji Tianxing tried to persuade her again. Yao Yao, I have already asked Black Eagle to inform Granny Long. He will be here soon. Let's first report what happened in detail to Granny Long and let her send a message to the Divine Master. Let's see what the Divine Master decides. Yun Yao nodded again and replied. Just as he said, Granny Long rushed over in a short while. As soon as she entered the room, she asked impatiently, Yun Yao, Tianxing? You're both back? Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao quickly bowed. Granny Long stood in front of the two of them and looked at Ji Tianxing from head to toe. Then she revealed a gratified smile. Tianxing, I haven't seen you for more than 2 years. Your strength has become even more unfathomable. You have improved again. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and did not say much. Granny Long then looked at Yun Yao and said, Yao Yao, you and Divine Official Luo went to North Underworld Mountain to search for the Divine Pearl. You must have gone through a lot of dangers. Now that you've returned safe and sound, I'm relieved. Alright, did you find the Divine Orb? What about Divine Official Luo? Why don't I see her? Hearing this, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao's hearts became heavier and heavier. How astute was Granny Long? Seeing that the two of them were silent and had strange expressions, she suddenly had a bad premonition. Tianxing, Yun Yao, say something. What about Divine Official Luo? Why didn't she come back? Could it be that something happened to her? As she asked, the smile on Granny Long's face and the anticipation and gratification in her eyes quickly disappeared. Yun Yao could no longer hold back her sadness. She bowed to Granny Long and said in a sorrowful voice, Granny, it's all Yun Yao's fault. It's all my fault. Granny Long's expression changed. Her eyes were filled with shock. She asked anxiously, Yun Yao, what happened? Divine Official Luo is one of the best martial saints. How could something happen to her? Yun Yao's eyes were covered with a layer of mist. She said in a sorrowful voice, We found the traces of the Divine Orb in North Underworld Mountain's Ghost Desert. But we had fought with the demon race's experts and revealed our whereabouts. We were surrounded by the great demon saint. She told Granny Long everything that had happened. After Granny Long heard it, she was shocked and angry. Her eyes were filled with mist. She couldn't help but shed tears. How could this happen? Divine Official Luo was so young and talented. She was favored by the Divine Lord. How could she be forced to self-detonate? Goddamn demon race. Goddamned great demon saint. Granny Long's hatred for the demon race had reached its peak. She couldn't wait to kill the great demon saint to avenge Luo Li. However, Granny Long was a martial saint who had lived for 1 to 2,000 years. She had experienced all kinds of storms. Not long after she calmed down. Her face was solemn and her eyes were cold. She said in a low voice, Luo Li's death and the death of hundreds of millions of Divine Nation's citizens were caused by the demon race. Our Luo River Divine Nation and the North Underworld Mountain cannot live under the same sky. No matter what, we must expel the demon race and kill all of them to avenge Luo Li and the people of Divine Nation. After saying that, she turned to Yun Yao and said in a dignified voice, Yun Yao, I know that you and Divine Official Luo are good friends. She self-detonated and died. You must be sad. But since things have come to this, it's useless to be sad. The most important thing now is to recover from your injuries and refine the divine orb to increase your strength. Only when you are strong enough to kill the great demon saint and avenge Luo Li will she be able to rest in peace. You are the Divine Master's most valued divine lady and the future sovereign of Divine Nation. I believe that you will be able to suppress your pain, pull yourself together and take revenge for Luo Li. Yun Yao nodded and said in a firm voice, Granny, don't worry. In this life, Yun Yao swears to kill the great demon saint. I will avenge Luo Li and appease her soul in heaven. Granny Long also nodded and said, all right, go to the secret room to heal your injuries and refine the divine orb as soon as possible. I still have something to say to Tianxing alone. Yun Yao looked at her and vaguely guessed her intention. However, Yun Yao didn't say anything. She just nodded and went to the secret room to cultivate. Only Granny Long and Ji Tianxing were left in the room. Ji Tianxing then said, Granny Long, don't worry. Luo Li died to protect me and Yun Yao. I will definitely kill the great demon saint and avenge her. Granny Long shook her head and said in a heavy voice, Tianxing, it's enough that you and Yun Yao have such intentions. Divine Official Luo won't blame you. However, the great demon saint is extremely strong and is the strongest expert of the demon clan. Even Divine Official Luo wasn't his opponent. Yun Yao, sigh. Then she shook her head and sighed, comforting them, I just wanted to encourage Yun Yao. I didn't really ask her to avenge Luo Li. You two just focus on cultivating and increasing your strength as soon as possible. As for killing the great demon saint and avenging Luo Li, you don't have to worry about it for now. The Divine Master will arrange it. Obviously, Granny Long didn't think that Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao had the ability to avenge Luo Li. They were too young and only had the strength of the crossing tribulation realm. However, the great demon saint was the strongest expert of the demon clan, the expert closest to the deity realm. How could it be easy for them to take revenge? It would take at least a few hundred years to achieve it, right? Ji Tianxing understood what Granny Long meant, but he couldn't refute it. It was useless to say anything now. It would be better to kill the great demon saint himself in the future. After a moment of silence, he asked, Granny, I'm afraid you didn't ask me to stay here alone to talk about this, right? Is there any change in the situation of the northern border? Granny Long looked at him deeply and nodded, that's right. I can't hide anything from you. The situation of the northern border has reached the point where it could collapse at any time. Chapter 2044. What? The Northern Territory has fallen? Ji Tianxing turned pale with fright, revealing a look of disbelief. He never thought that in just a year of not paying attention to the situation in the Northern Territory, the situation would deteriorate to such an extent. Granny Long nodded with a solemn face and sighed heavily. The Northern Territory's 4 great empires, a total of 27 regions, have all been captured by the demons. Over the past 2 years, the demons have invested 50 million soldiers, persistently attacking the Northern Territory. Even though we have mobilized the forces of the great empires, conscripting 80 million soldiers, we still couldn't stop the demons' advance. More than 20 million soldiers died on the battlefield, and more than 300 million civilians died tragically under the demons' butcher's knife. More than 600 million civilians were persecuted by the flames of war, displaced and homeless. Although the 27 regions that have fallen are not even 1/10 of Scandinavia's territory. But this is a fatal blow to Scandinavia's morale. Now, the entire Scandinavia is in a state of panic, the morale of the army is unstable and the people are in turmoil. Hearing this, Ji Tianxing's mood became even heavier. His fists in his sleeves were clenched so tightly that creaking sounds could be heard. Damn it! Although these things were just empty numbers from Granny Long's mouth. But he had fought with the demons for many years. Of course he could imagine what kind of tragic disaster it would be. It would definitely be a scene of blood flowing and bones piling up like a mountain, a scene as tragic as hell. He couldn't help but recall the scene of him fighting against the demon race's army in the Central Plains. In his mind, many tragic and bloody scenes appeared. Thick anger and killing intent made him want to rush to the battlefield immediately, personally participate in the battle and kill the demon's army. Granny Long was silent for a while, and seeing his strange expression she said in a heavy tone, "Tianxing, this old woman knows what you are thinking. To be honest, this old woman can feel your anger and pain, and can't help but want to rush to the battlefield and kill the demons. But this old woman has a heavy responsibility, and also has to protect Luotian Mountain for the Divine Master. If this old woman leaves, Luotian Mountain will be in chaos, and the people's hearts will be even more scattered." Tianxing cupped his hands and said solemnly, "Granny Long, you have to guard Luotian Mountain. Naturally you can't rush to the battlefield and slay the fiend. But I'm different. I can personally go to the north to participate in the war and contribute to the protection of the God Nation." Granny Long revealed a gratified expression and nodded slightly. "Tianxing, you mentioned several times before that you wanted to go to the north to participate in the war, but this old one refused. But it's different now. You've already grown into an overlord. Even the dispirited pillar of heaven's mountains could be revived and restored to its former glory. This old one believes that you are already capable of shouldering heavy responsibilities by yourself. Over the past 2 years, the elders and the generals of the various empires have tried all kinds of methods to deal with the demon race. Unfortunately, the demons were too powerful and treacherous. At this point, we are at our wits' end and can only use human lives to fill the gap, using the flesh and blood of our soldiers to build a defensive line to resist the advance of the demon race. If you can participate in the war with your strength, stratagems and methods, even if you can't repel the demon race's army, you can at least delay their advance." Tianxing was about to agree, but Granny Long waved her hand to stop him. She said solemnly, "Tianxing, it's reasonable to say that you and Yunyao need to rest the most now. You have already left Luotian Mountain to take charge of Pillar of Heaven's mountains. This old one has no qualifications to ask you to fight for the Luotian God Nation. But this old one has no other choice. I can only shamelessly ask you. I hope that for the sake of our past friendship." As she spoke, Granny Long bent her waist and bowed deeply to him. Tianxing's body shook and he quickly reached out to help her up. "Granny, what are you doing? Please get up quickly. Tianxing am not an ungrateful person. I will never forget the kindness of Luotian Mountain and the God Lord. Even if you don't ask me, I will also go to the north to participate in the war and kill the demons. This is not only for the God Nation's citizens but also for me, for Yunyao and Luoli." Granny Long was deeply comforted. Her eyes were slightly red as she said solemnly, "Tianxing, this old one sincerely thanks you on behalf of the God Lord and the God Nation's citizens for your kindness." Tianxing hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Granny, you're exaggerating. This is my duty in the first place. Don't worry, I will rest today and prepare. We will set off early tomorrow morning." Without waiting for him to finish, Granny Long shook her head and said, "No. You can't rush. This old one sees that your cultivation is full and your soul is surging. There seems to be signs of a breakthrough. You must go into seclusion in Luotian Mountain for a period of time. After you have broken through, you can go to the north. Moreover, this old one has to report the news to the God Lord and wait for his decision." Tianxing nodded and said, "Granny is indeed wise. To tell you the truth, I have reached the peak of the 8th stage and am about to welcome the 9th heavenly tribulation. Just yesterday I had a premonition that the heavenly tribulation is about to descend." Granny Long was instantly filled with shock as her eyes widened in disbelief. "What? You are about to break through to the 9th stage of the crossing tribulation realm? Heavens! It has only been 2.5 years and you have consecutively passed through 6 heavenly tribulations? This is simply unprecedented, an unimaginable miracle." Granny Long had lived for 2,000 years and could be said to be knowledgeable. She knew countless legends from the past to the present. But she had never heard of such an abnormal genius like Tianxing. After a long time, her emotions calmed down and said with a gratified face, No wonder you can control the Pillar of Heaven's mountain and control the overall situation. Since this is the case, this old one is even more relieved. When you break through to the 9th stage of the crossing tribulation realm and head to the north, you will definitely be able to give the devil race a head-on blow. Alright, this old one will not delay your time. Quickly go and cultivate and prepare for the heavenly tribulation. After saying that, Granny Long bid farewell and left. Xianxia also prepared for a while and entered the secret chamber to cultivate. After leaving the Cloud Water Palace, Granny Long returned to the Cloud Dragon Palace. She entered the secret chamber and walked to a simple and elegant table. On the table, there was an exquisite and gorgeous diamond-shaped gem. Granny Long cast a spell solemnly and injected her magic power into the diamond-shaped gem. Suddenly, the diamond-shaped gem lit up with white light and formed a wide light screen in midair. A woman in a blue dress with an elegant temperament and a noble appearance appeared on the white light screen. This woman seemed to be in her 20s. Her face was beautiful, her eyes were like stars, and her temperament was like a goddess from the 9 heavens. Without a doubt, she was the ruler of the Luoshui divine kingdom, the Luoshui martial god. Of course, this was not the true body of the Luoshui martial god. It was just a projection of her avatar. Granny Long, what's the matter? The Luoshui martial god looked at Granny Long calmly and asked. Chapter 2045. What? Even though Luoshui martial god had an elegant temperament and was as calm as autumn water, when she heard the news of Luo Li's death, her expression changed and she frowned. Luo Li, she passed away? Granny Long, what's going on? Luoshui martial god's expression was solemn and his eyes were filled with pain. Granny Long hurriedly recounted what had happened in detail. After Luoshui martial god finished listening, his face was as cold as ice and his eyes were filled with cold killing intent. Even the lofty Luoshui martial god was infuriated. After all, she was the one who raised Luo Li and taught her. Not only was Luo Li her most trusted god official, but she was also her most trusted right-hand woman. Luoshui martial god treated her like her own daughter and had high hopes for her. Granny Long saw Luoshui martial god's ugly expression and comforted him. God Master, please restrain your grief and don't be too worried. God official Luo Li was loyal her entire life and didn't hesitate to die in order to follow the god's orders. It's the blessing of the God Kingdom's people for God Master to have such a trusted general and God Kingdom to have such a loyal minister. Luoshui martial god was silent for a long time before he gradually suppressed his anger and said in a cold voice, "This god originally wanted Yun Yao and Luo Li and poured my efforts into them. This god only hoped that Luo Li could assist Yun Yao in ascending to the god throne and take control of Luoshui God Kingdom. I didn't expect that Luo Li would die before this god's wish was fulfilled. Luoshui God Kingdom and North Underworld Mountain are irreconcilable. This god will not sit by and watch this blood feud. I will personally go and flatten North Underworld Mountain. I will avenge Luo Li and comfort her soul in heaven." Granny Long's expression changed and she quickly dissuaded him. "God Master, you can't do that. North Underworld Mountain is dangerous and is a nest that the demon race carefully built for 30,000 years. Almost no one can enter the hinterland. Moreover, you are in seclusion and comprehending a divine technique. You will be able to break through within 100 years and become the leader of the 3 martial gods. You can't destroy 300 years of hard work just because of a moment of anger." Luoshui martial god had been in seclusion for 300 years. His closed-door cultivation this time went very smoothly, and his strength was also constantly improving. Just as Granny Long had said, after 100 years, Luoshui martial god would achieve another breakthrough. By then her strength would surpass the 2 martial gods Tianjue and Taihao, and she would become the leader of the martial gods. But now Luo Li's death caused her to be filled with grief and indignation. She actually wanted to come out of seclusion and go to the northern underworld mountain for revenge. Once he forcefully ended his cultivation, the previous 300 years of hard work would be completely destroyed. Granny Long tried to dissuade him. Luoshui martial god shook his head and explained, "Granny Long, don't worry. I'm at a critical moment in my cultivation. I won't come out of seclusion." Hearing her say that, Granny Long felt a little relieved. After thinking for a while, she was enlightened and said, "I understand now. Divine Lord, you want to send a clone to the North Underworld Mountain to kill the great demon saint and avenge divine official Luo?" Luoshui martial god nodded slightly and said seriously, That's right. I haven't shown my face for 300 years. I'm afraid the world has already forgotten my heaven-defying methods. Now that the demon race is invading and the great demon saint killed Luoli, if I don't take action, what prestige do I have left? I'll send a divine soul clone to kill my way into the North Underworld Mountain. Not only will I kill the great demon saint, I'll also destroy the North Underworld Palace. Luo Shui martial god's tone was cold, and his voice was sonorous and unquestionable. Granny Long immediately bowed and cupped her hands. Divine Lord is wise. I wish Divine Lord victory and destroy the North Underworld Palace in one go. Luo Shui martial god didn't say anything else and turned to leave. Her figure soon disappeared in the white light screen. A moment later, the white light screen also dissipated. Granny Long was stunned for a moment. A gratified smile appeared on her face as she muttered to herself, Luo Li, Divine Lord has personally avenged you. If you're in heaven, you should rest in peace. In the next few days, Luo Shui Mountain regained its peace. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were cultivating in seclusion in a secret room. Yun Yao was busy refining the Earth's spirit divine pearl, while Ji Tianxing was consolidating his martial Dao and preparing for the 9th heavenly tribulation. Granny Long was as busy as ever. She had to preside over the overall situation of Luo Shui Mountain and worry about the war in the north. The disciples of Luo Shui Mountain were also cultivating day and night to increase their strength. When the time was right, they would rush to the battlefield to kill the demon race and shed blood for the Luo Shui divine kingdom. At the same time, the North Underworld Mountain that had just calmed down was stirred up again. Previously, Ji Tianxing and the others barged into North Underworld Mountain and slaughtered the entire demon race tribe. They were even surrounded by the great demon saint. The news had already spread in North Underworld Mountain, causing billions of demons to discuss it. Now that it had been more than a month, it finally calmed down. But on this evening, an uninvited guest appeared in the sky above Saint Devil City. Whoosh! A crack suddenly appeared in the sky tens of thousands of feet above the ground. A dark golden divine light lit up like a setting sun. An icy blue figure flew out of the giant crack. This figure was a young woman with a graceful figure, elegant and holy, and a cold aura. She wore an icy blue dress, and her hair was tied up in a noble and dignified bun. She wore a simple but not simple jade crown and hairpin. If this was the human world, the people would definitely bow and worship her. They would think that a goddess of the 9 heavens had descended to the mortal world. After all, her appearance and aura were no different from that of a god. She was one of martial god Luo Shui's divine soul avatars. The setting sun was as red as blood, illuminating heaven and earth. However, it couldn't pierce through the layers of dark clouds above Saint Devil City. Saint Devil City was the most sacred and prosperous city in North Underworld Mountain. This was the sacred land of North Underworld Mountain. North of the city was the divine mountain where North Underworld Palace was located. The city was situated on a plain surrounded by mountains. It had a radius of 200 miles, and there were more than 2 million demons living in it. Giant black stone walls that were hundreds of miles long formed a circle around the city, protecting it. The city was flourishing and prosperous, and there were a myriad of buildings and palaces within it. Towering towers stood like trees in a forest, and there were row upon row of residences that were innumerable. All the buildings were built with black, brown, and gray rocks. All the buildings retained their ancient style. One could vaguely see the shadows of the ancient demon race's buildings. Giant statues of demons and asuras stood at the top of many tall towers, buildings, and palaces. They looked solemn and mysterious. At this moment, Luo Shui was standing high in the sky, looking down at Saint Devil City. Saint Devil City was bustling with people. Lanterns were lit and it was a lively scene. However, some experts noticed something strange. They saw the sky crack and the golden light burst out with their own eyes. Immediately, those experts shouted loudly and spread the news. Chapter 2046. The entire Saint Devil City was in an uproar. Tens of thousands of demons looked up at the sky, loudly discussing and shouting. Everyone look. There's someone in the sky. There was a golden light just now. The sky seems to have split open. I saw it too. There's indeed someone standing in the sky and it seems to be a human woman. That's a human expert. A strong enemy has invaded. What are you all standing there for? Quickly report to the city guard. Who dares to trespass into our holy city? They must be tired of living. I bet that in less than 10 breaths of time, that human woman will be killed by the second demon lord and eaten as dinner. Of course, the second demon lord is in charge of the city guard and the city guard. He has the most violent temperament. Any foreign race that falls into his hands will become his meal. Look, the second demon lord has indeed made his move. Just as the demons were discussing, a bloody light shot into the sky from the plaza in the center of the city. The dark red light soared into the sky, heading straight for the Luo Shui clone. Within that bloody light was a monster the size of a mountain of flesh. It had a shockingly round body and 4 short, thick limbs. Probably because its body was too fat and huge, its body was covered in dark red sarcomas. It looked extremely sinister and terrifying. It had a round head on top of its 10 feet tall body. It had a wide, bloody mouth, and a pair of small eyes stared at the Luo Shui clone, flashing with a savage and bloodthirsty light. Without a doubt, this disgusting and ugly monster was the second of the 36 demon lords, the infamous second demon lord. At the same time, it was the commander of the city guard and the city guard, in charge of the safety of the holy city. Behind it were 4 city guard captains, all of them second and third level tribulation transcendence experts. In just 2 breaths of time, the dark red light flew into the sky and arrived in front of the Luo Shui clone. The 2 sides were separated by 10,000 feet facing each other in the sky. This lord has been bored for a long time. I didn't expect that a human woman would take the initiative to deliver herself to me today. Such fresh and tender flesh, blood and soul incomparably pure. It's definitely a delicious meal that's hard to come by in 100 years. The second demon monarch stared greedily at the Luo Shui doppelganger and laughed in satisfaction. Black saliva dripped from the corner of his mouth. The 4 captains of the city guard army also had sinister smiles on their faces, their bodies surging with murderous intent. In Saint Devil City, countless devils looked up at the sky, staring at the second demon monarch and the Luo Shui clone, waiting for a good show. Everyone was certain that the human woman was dead meat. Thinking that the tender human girl was about to be torn into pieces and eaten by the second demon king, people couldn't help but feel their blood boiling. A brutal aura surged in their hearts. However, the scene in the next moment made everyone dumbfounded. The Luo Shui doppelganger looked at the second demon lord expressionlessly. Without saying a word, it raised its right palm and shot out a dazzling stream of icy blue light. Shwa! That icy blue flowing light was like a fire that covered the sky. It was also like a meteor that streaked across the sky and engulfed the second demon monarch and the 4 city guard captains. Although the second demon monarch was a powerhouse in the 8th stage of the crossing tribulation realm, the strength of the 4 city guard captains was not ordinary. But the 5 powerhouses were caught off guard and did not even have the chance to dodge. Boom! With a muffled sound, the bodies of the second demon monarch and the 4 city guard captains instantly collapsed, turning into fragments that fell from the sky. Even their souls were torn apart and destroyed on the spot. The Luo Shui doppelganger had actually killed 5 crossing tribulation realm powerhouses with a casual palm strike. The entire process was understated without the slightest trace of smoke or fire. It was simply elegant and otherworldly, like the work of an immortal. In Saint Devil City, countless devils witnessed it with their own eyes. All of them were dumbfounded, their bodies stiffened on the spot. Everyone was dumbfounded. No one could believe that the human woman had such terrifying power. However, this was only the beginning of the disaster. The icy blue flowing light's power did not decrease at all. It poured into Saint Devil City like a flood. Rumble! With an earth-shattering sound, countless houses and buildings were engulfed by the icy blue flowing light. In an area of 5 kilometers, tens of thousands of houses and palaces were immediately covered by an icy blue sea of fire. A huge pit appeared in the ground and a wide ravine split open. Tens of thousands of houses and buildings were reduced to ashes in the sea of fire, reduced to ruins. Tens of thousands of devil martial artists and commoners were also burned to ashes by the icy blue sea of fire, no longer existing. Such a terrifying scene with its world-destroying momentum immediately awakened the entire Saint Devil City. All kinds of screams, shouts, angry curses and roars converged into an earth-shattering sound wave that exploded in the sky above the city. Thousands of devil experts and armored city guards soared into the sky with murderous intent, wanting to besiege the Luo Shui doppelganger. However, before the thousands of experts could fly into the sky, the Luo Shui doppelganger waved her slender hand again, sprinkling down an icy blue flowing light. Water moon clear sky. The icy blue splendor that was dozens of kilometers long fell from the sky like a crescent moon. Instantly, the icy blue crescent moon released a torrential flood that poured into St. Devil City. More than half of St. Devil City was submerged in the icy blue flood. The icy blue divine water was bone-chilling and quickly turned into extreme ice. Hundreds of thousands of houses and buildings, and millions of devil martial artists and commoners were all sealed in the extreme ice. The sturdy stone houses and palaces were all frozen to dust, and the ground also cracked open. 90% of the devils below the tribulation transcending realm were immediately frozen to death. All of them turned into ice crystals. Only the tribulation transcending realm experts were able to resist the power of the extreme ice. After suffering heavy injuries, they bitterly held on. In an instant, half of the originally bustling St. Devil City was turned into a ghost town. More than 1 million devil martial artists and commoners were killed by the Luo Shui doppelganger's divine technique. Their bodies and souls turned to dust. Many of the devils died in an instant, not feeling any pain at all. Sealed in ice crystals, they still retained their expressions and movements from the last moment of their lives. Many people looked up at the sky, their eyes and faces filled with fear. Such a horrifying scene scared all the devils out of their wits. The surviving experts of the demon clan immediately realized that the human woman in the blue dress must be a divine transcendence expert. At the very least, she was a peak martial saint. Only a peak martial saint could release such a terrifying power, destroying half of St. Devil City in one move and slaughtering millions of devils. St. Devil City was instantly thrown into chaos. In the other half of the city, the millions of devils were horrified, fleeing out of the city in panic. All kinds of cries, curses and roars mixed together, resounding through the sky. Countless devils fled through the streets and alleys, speeding through the sky, fleeing to the north of the city. As long as they crossed a few mountains and fled to the north, they would be able to reach the foot of the divine mountain. Chapter 2047. However, Luo Shui's clone came with a monstrous hatred. She had made up her mind to destroy St. Devil City and flatten Baiming Palace to avenge Luo Li. How could she let those millions of demons go? Heavenly River overturn. Luo Shui's clone looked down at St. Devil City expressionlessly. Looking at the millions of demons that were fleeing in panic, her eyes were extremely cold, without the slightest bit of pity. She gave a low shout and raised her hands to form a seal, using another divine technique. Suddenly, thousands of silver lights lit up in the sky. That was the endless power of the stars, gathered by Luo Shui's divine technique. Swish, swish, swish. After a few breaths, thousands of silver lights gathered together, forming an indomitable starry river that was hundreds of miles wide. The silver-white starry river was like a huge waterfall, descending from the depths of the starry sky and falling towards St. Devil City. In the 1,000-mile-long starry river, there was an endless amount of starry divine fire, enough to burn everything. Boom! With a deafening muffled sound, the starry river fiercely hit St. Devil City. Instantly, the surging star divine fire spread out like a torrential flood, drowning the other half of St. Devil City. In the area of hundreds of miles, hundreds of thousands of buildings and millions of demons were all floating in the sea of starry fire, desperately struggling. No matter how sturdy the buildings were, even if they were protected by demon Dao rays, they were all burned by the starry divine fire, turning into ruins and dust. All the demons below the crossing calamity realm were burned to ashes, leaving only black ashes scattered in the ruins. Not only were their physical bodies destroyed, even their souls were annihilated in the sea of starry fire. What a scene of destruction! In just 10 breaths, millions of demons and martial artists were annihilated in the sea of starry fire. Only a few tens of thousands of people who were stronger or had magical treasures to protect themselves were lucky enough to survive. Of course, these survivors were also heavily injured, fleeing St. Devil City in a sorry state, fleeing towards the north. Not long after, the sea of starry fire and Luo Shui's extreme ice gradually dissipated. St. Devil City returned to peace. The calamity that destroyed the world was finally over. However, St. Devil City was also destroyed, turning into ruins with a radius of 200 miles. The earth cracked, filled with ravines and deep pits. Not a single intact building or palace could be found among the ruins. There were dilapidated walls everywhere, and the ground was covered in debris and black ash. Anyone who saw this scene would find it hard to believe that this used to be the most prosperous Saint Devil city in the North Underworld Mountains. This ancient and sacred city with 10,000 years of history was destroyed just like that. Of the more than 2 million demon civilians and martial artists, only a few 100,000 remained. They fled miserably toward the northern Divine Mountain. Of course, there were more than 1,000 tribulation transcendence experts guarding Saint Devil City. There was also a demon saint and 6 demon monarchs. The Luo Shui clone only used 20 breaths of time to execute 2 divine techniques and completely destroy Saint Devil City. This was something that no one had expected. The demon saint and the 6 demon monarchs were shocked, terrified, and furious. Hundreds of thousands of heavily injured devil race elites had fled the Saint Devil City. However, this demon saint and the 6 demon monarchs were too ashamed to escape. They could only stay and fly high up in the sky surrounding the Luo Shui clone. The demon saint leading the group was the new demon saint who had just broken through to the martial sage realm a few months ago, Qianren. This person was 30 feet tall and his body was thin. His bones and flesh were like firewood and he looked like a black demon wolf. However, there were 4 pairs of wings on his back. The black wings shone with a cold light, and his body exuded an extremely sharp aura. He stood in the sky 10 miles away from the Luo Shui clone, and they faced each other from afar. The other 6 demon monarchs were all of different sizes and had strange appearances. Each of them had their own talents and skills. The group formed a circle holding weapons and glared at the Luo Shui clone with hatred in their eyes. Demon Saint Qianren frowned and glared at the Luo Shui clone. He asked in a low voice, "You bitch, what grudge do you have with my tribe? How could you be so cruel and vicious? You destroyed the entire Saint Devil City and killed 2 million of my people. You are infuriating. Tell me, who are you and why did you do this?" In fact, Demon Saint Qianren had guessed that the Luo Shui clone was related to the Luo Shui kingdom. He was just saying this on purpose to stall for time. After all, the Luo Shui clone was much stronger than an ordinary martial saint. He was definitely not her match. He could only wait for the experts in Baiming Palace to come to his aid. The Luo Shui clone slowly turned her head and looked at him coldly. She said in a cold voice, "I killed 2 million demon clan members. Am I cruel and vicious and infuriating? Your demon clan invaded the Luo Shui kingdom and killed 300 million people, causing 700 million people to be homeless. What kind of behavior is this? It is cruel and bloodthirsty to the extreme. It is so vicious that it makes one's hair stand on end. Even heaven and earth will not tolerate it." As he spoke, the Luo Shui clone naturally exuded a soaring hatred and killing intent, forming an invisible pressure that enveloped the area within a radius of 100 li. Demon Saint Qianren and the 6 demon monarchs were shocked by her pressure, and their hearts were filled with respect. However, Demon Saint Qianren did not panic. He did not show any fear or worry. He looked at the Luo Shui clone and sneered disdainfully, "I see. I did not guess wrongly. You are really from the Luo Shui kingdom. The people of the Luo Shui kingdom are all weak and useless insects. They do not have the right to occupy the vast land in the east of the continent. So what if my army has invaded and killed a few 100 million people? This is only the beginning. Sooner or later, my warriors will kill all the people of the Luo Shui kingdom and occupy the entire Luo Shui kingdom. Of course, you will not be able to see that day, because today you will definitely die." Demon Saint Qianren had already sensed that in Baiming Palace, which was 1,000 miles away, there was a strong demonic aura. 2 incomparably powerful auras were rushing over at the fastest speed. Therefore, he had the confidence to be so confident. How could Luo Shui not see through Demon Saint Qianren's intentions? Do you think that the great demon saint can save you? Wishful thinking. The reason why I am talking to you is because I am waiting for him to come and die." As she spoke, the Luo Shui clone raised her hands again. Her 10 fingers formed a seal and instantly dozens of icy blue sword lights shot out. Swish, swish, swish. The more than 90 icy blue sword lights were like icicles. They were bone-chilling and extremely sharp. The numerous sword lights shot out in all directions like a blossoming ice flower. It was extremely beautiful. Demon Saint Qianren saw that the situation was not good. He instinctively teleported to dodge, but he was still stabbed by a sword light. A deep wound was left on his waist. The 6 demon monarchs were shocked. They wanted to escape, but it was too late. Chapter 2048. The 6 demon lords were lucky enough to survive. However, they were severely injured. Their bodies were drenched in blood and they looked miserable. Demon Saint Thousand frowned. His eyes were filled with worry. He was worried that he and the 6 demon lords would not be able to hold on until reinforcements arrived. All of you brace yourselves for this sage. Everyone, let's work together and set up the ancient demon 6 directions array. We must trap her. Demon Saint Thousand ordered. He took the lead to cast a spell and cast a blood-red light that covered the sky towards Luo Xue's clone. The 6 demon monarchs disregarded their injuries and spread out into a formation, casting spells to form a demon Dao grand array. The blood-red light that covered the sky, the surging demon qi and the shadows of various spells immediately engulfed Luo Xue's clone. A saint-level array was quickly forming. It covered a radius of 200 miles. Demon Saint Thousand knew that it would take at least a few hours to complete the array. He did not dare to hope that he could trap her for a few hours. He only hoped that he could delay her for half an hour. However, he soon realized that this was just wishful thinking. Luo Xue's clone looked around expressionlessly. Looking at the blood-red light that covered the sky, a cold glint flashed across her eyes. She did not say a word. She raised her hands and cast a spell. Dozens of icy blue light blades shot out. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. More than 60 icy blue light blades formed an extraordinary sword array. They pierced forward as fast as lightning. With a loud boom boom boom, the bloody light barrier that had just been condensed was immediately shattered into pieces by the icy blue light blade. A huge gap appeared. Luo Xue's clone moved gracefully. In a flash, she stepped through the gap and appeared in the sky 15 miles away. At the same time, the sword array formed by the icy blue light blades struck 2 demon lords. The 2 demon lords did not have the chance to dodge. They were immediately turned into dust by the light blades. Luo Xue's clone took another step and teleported 15 miles away. She suddenly appeared behind another demon lord. She raised her slender white hand and struck the demon lord with her palm. Bam! Before this demon monarch could react, his body shattered into pieces with a bang and even his soul was destroyed. Following that, Luo Xue's clone continued to teleport. Within 2 breaths, the remaining 3 demon monarchs were instantly killed. The 6 demon monarchs had all been reduced to ashes, and the demon Dao holy array that had yet to be formed naturally vanished. The 1000 Devil Saint was completely terrified. He no longer dared to continue fighting and fled to the north in a panic. At this moment he no longer dared to hope that he could block the attack of the Luo Xue clone. He only hoped to shake off the pursuit and safely return to Baiming Palace. Shua! The 1000 demon saint turned into a streak of crimson light and sped towards the north at lightning speed. His figure flickered continuously in the sky. However, he had only flown 200 miles when he was caught up by the Luo water clone. Shua! The Luo water clone took light steps forward, her posture graceful and calm. Every step she took brought her several dozen li away. In just 7 steps she had caught up with the 1000 demon saint. She raised her right hand and struck him with her palm. In her slender and tender palm, the star fire surged violently and formed a wide silver light blade. It slashed towards the 1000 demon saint like a guillotine. The 1000 demon saint sensed the impending danger. He instantly felt a chill down his spine and his soul almost left his body. He turned around without hesitation and cast a spell to form a crimson light shield in an attempt to block the attack. Bam! With a muffled explosion, the starlight blade shattered the crimson light and struck the 1000 demon saint. He was sent flying on the spot. Blood spurted from his body as he tumbled towards the north. After flying for 50 li, he managed to neutralize the impact and stabilized his body. He looked down and saw a 2-foot-long wound on his chest. It was so deep that his bones could be seen. His robes and soft armor had been torn open, rolling outwards like his flesh. Dark purple demon blood flowed out from the wound and sprinkled in the sky. The excruciating pain continued to assault the 1000 demon saint, causing him to break out in cold sweat. However, he did not dare to hesitate or treat his wound. He continued to flee towards the north with all his might. After 3 breaths, he finally crossed a towering mountain range and flew over a valley. He was already halfway there. He was still 500 li away from Beiming Palace. Before the 1,000-rin demon saint could heave a sigh of relief, an icy blue stream of light attacked him from behind. It caused him to feel fear from the depths of his soul. Swoosh! The icy blue stream of light streaked across the sky and engulfed the 1,000-rin demon saint. His flesh and blood were frozen stiff. He could not circulate his demon chi smoothly and his flying speed was reduced by half. Bam! Another 1,000-feet-long ice sword slashed down and instantly cut off his pair of wings. The black wings shattered into pieces. Dark purple demon blood spurted out and sprinkled in the sky. The 1,000-rin demon saint let out a shrill cry and continued to flee towards the north. After crossing the valley, he flew over a towering mountain peak that was 10,000 feet tall. In front of him was a dark brown wasteland. Hundreds of thousands of heavily injured demon race elites were flying above the wasteland. They looked towards the north as if their lives depended on it. With so many demons gathered together, it was like a black flood. At the end of the wasteland was a towering mountain that was 10,000 feet tall. Everything below the mountainside of the giant mountain was pitch black. However, everything above the mountainside was dark red in color. It was extremely eerie. Boundless black clouds and demon chi shrouded the entire mountain and covered the vast wasteland. Without a doubt, the majestic mountain was the divine mountain where the ancestral demon gods and demon saints resided. The famous Beiming Palace was located on that divine mountain. Finally, he saw the divine mountain. The 1,000-rin demon saint was excited. He endured his injuries and sped up. However, just as he was flying above the wasteland, another wave of blade light and sword shadows came down from behind him. Swish, 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 swish. The Luo water clone was waving its arms and releasing icy light that covered the sky. It formed millions of light blades and bombarded the entire wasteland. The 1,000-rin demon saint did not dare to be careless. He could only take out a shield and cast a spell to enlarge it to protect himself. Countless icy light and sword shadows bombarded the shield, causing it to tremble. Bloody light and black demon chi burst out. The 1,000-rin demon saint had a dharma treasure to protect himself. He was temporarily safe. However, the hundreds of thousands of demons in the wasteland were instantly killed. Bam 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 bam. Endless muffled sounds rang out continuously, one after another. Batch after batch of demon race elites fell like wheat being cut down. They were killed and turned into dregs. The dark brown wasteland was also filled with holes from the impact of the blade light and sword shadows. Sand and dust filled the air. It was a chaotic scene. It was as if doomsday had arrived. After 10 breaths of time, the millions of icy light and sword shadows finally dissipated. The wasteland in a radius of 300 miles had long been turned into ruins filled with holes and ravines. Tens of thousands of demon race elites had been turned into flesh and blood and scattered on the wasteland. The dark brown earth and soil were also dyed with a layer of dark purple. The tens of thousands of demon race elites who were lucky enough to survive were also horrified. They fled in all directions. The 1,000-rin demon saint was lucky enough to survive. He flew toward the divine mountain in a panic. Chapter 2049. Swoosh. 2 gigantic palms that covered the sky descended from the heavens like the hands of a god. Everything within a radius of 10 miles was covered by the palms. The air was also compressed and turned into a vacuum zone. Even the space was sealed by a formless force. The 1,000-rin demon saint wanted to teleport away, but he was unable to do so. No. At the moment of life and death, the 1,000-rin demon saint looked up at the gigantic palms in the sky and let out a furious roar. His voice was filled with unwillingness. 200 miles away at the end of the wasteland, a dazzling blood-red light shone. The blood-red light sped over and wrapped around 2 figures. They were both martial sages of the demon Tao. Stop. How dare you? How dare you? The 2 demon sages had just received news of the enemy's invasion and destruction of Saint Devil City. They had rushed over to help. However, they had just flown down from the godly mountain when they saw the scene in the sky above the wasteland. The 2 of them were filled with rage and could not help but shout. The 1,000-rin demon saint also saw the 2 demon sages and was overjoyed. He shouted, Great Demon Saint, Third Demon Saint, save me. Without a doubt, the two demon sages that were flying over were the Great Demon Saint and the Third Demon Saint. However, it was a pity that they were too far away. Even if they wanted to save him, they were too far away. The two of them could only watch as the two gigantic palms that covered the sky slammed into the Thousand-Run Demon Saint. Boom! With a deafening explosion, the Thousand-Run Demon Saint's body exploded and turned into tens of thousands of pieces of flesh and blood that splattered in all directions. Dark purple blood mist wrapped around the pieces of flesh and blood and scattered in the sky. A dark purple godly soul flew out from the pieces of flesh and blood and fled toward the godly mountain in a panic. At the same time, the two gigantic icy blue palms did not lose their power and slammed into the wasteland. Rumble! An earth-shattering explosion erupted and shook the universe. The wasteland, which was already in ruins, was immediately smashed into two craters that were hundreds of miles wide. Dirt and rocks flew everywhere. The wasteland was completely destroyed. It was truly earth-shattering. Swoosh! The Luo Shui clone did not give up. Its figure flashed as it chased after the Thousand-Run Demon Saint's godly soul. Even though the Thousand Nightmare Demonic Saint's physical body had been destroyed and only his divine soul was left, the Thousand Nightmare Demonic Saint was still alive. However, as long as he managed to escape and recuperate in seclusion for 100 years, he would be able to rebuild his body and return to his peak state. Furthermore, Luo Shui knew that the demon race had all sorts of evil secret techniques that could allow the Thousand-Run Demon Saint to recover his powers in a short period of time. Therefore, she had to eliminate the source of the problem. If he didn't kill the Thousand Nightmare Devil Saint today, the Thousand Nightmare Devil Saint would be able to slaughter hundreds of thousands of human soldiers on the northern battlefield. In the blink of an eye, the Luo water clone caught up with the Thousand-Run Demon Saint's spirit. She conjured a spell with both her hands and waved them rapidly. She unleashed a torrential amount of spiritual energy towards the Thousand-Run Demon Saint. Soul Extinguishing Fist. The incomparably powerful spiritual energy was originally an intangible thing. Under the support of Luo Shui's secret technique, it actually condensed into a light blue fist light that was the size of a palace. At the same time, the Great Devil Saint and the Third Devil Saint also arrived at the scene. Damn you, bitch! You are courting death. Today I will tear you to pieces. The two Devil Saints roared at the same time. They waved their palms and released a powerful amount of spiritual energy towards the Luo water clone. If Luo Shui insisted on killing the Thousand-Run Demon Saint and refused to stop, she would also be injured by the two Devil Saints. The two Devil Saints were certain that she would not allow both of them to be injured. She would definitely cast a spell to defend herself. This way the Thousand-Run Demon Saint would be able to escape death. However, what the two Devil Saints did not expect was that the Luo water clone actually ignored their attacks. She stared at the Thousand-Run Demon Saint's spiritual energy coldly. She was determined to kill him. Boom! The light blue soul extinguishing fist struck the Thousand-Run Demon Saint's spiritual energy with a mighty force. Amidst the thunderous sound, the dark purple spiritual energy was instantly shattered into pieces and scattered across the sky. The newly promoted Devil Saint Thousand-Run had died just like that. Not even his corpse was left behind. He had only enjoyed 2 months of glory. He did not even have the time to go to the battlefield and contribute to the demon race before he died just like that. The Great Devil Saint and the Third Devil Saint witnessed this scene with their own eyes. They were so angry that their eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. Their bodies were burning with murderous flames. In the next moment, the two Devil Saints released their spiritual energy attacks and struck the Luo water clone. Bam! The Luo Shui clone was sent flying backwards, tumbling 100 miles away. Her face was as pale as a sheet of paper. Fresh blood flowed out of her mouth and nose. She was in a sorry state. However, other than that, she was not injured at all. Even though this was only a clone of the Luo water martial god. She had used the Luo water heavenly supreme Tao to peel off a strand of her spiritual energy and used her own blood to create this spiritual energy clone. However, this was still a real body made of flesh and blood. It possessed 20% of her strength. Even though she had taken on the combined attacks of the Great Devil Saint and the Third Devil Saint, she was only slightly injured. She was sent flying 50 miles away. She quickly stabilized her body and stood steadily in the sky. Swoosh! A green light flashed across her body. She circulated her energy to suppress the chaotic dermic powers. Her spiritual energy also calmed down. In the blink of an eye, she returned to her original state and no one could tell that she had been injured. She stood proudly in the sky and looked coldly at the great devil saint. She said in a cold voice, "Great devil saint Ling Xian, you finally appeared." The Luo water clone's eyes were fixed on the great devil saint, and she did not even look at the third devil saint. The third devil saint, Li Tuo, was an old demon who had been famous for 2,000 years. His original body was an ancient variant descendant of the heaven-devouring blood leech. He was incomparably huge, valiant, and ugly. Normally, he would appear in front of others in his magical form. He was a middle-aged man who was over 3 meters tall and covered in dark red. However, the Luo water clone had come to Dark North Mountain to avenge Luo Li. Her primary goal was to kill the great devil saint Ling Xian. Ling Xian stood in the sky and frowned as he looked at the Luo water clone. His eyes flickered with bewilderment. "Who are you? How do you know my real name?" For 2,000 years he had only had one title, Dark North Mountain's Great Devil Saint. Regardless of whether it was the demons of Dark North Mountain or the various powerhouses of Shenwu continent, everyone knew that he was the strongest demon. However, no one knew that he was not actually a true demon. He had been born 4,000 years ago and he was a citizen of the vast divine kingdom. He had been born in an ancient tribe called Shadow. At that time, Shenwu continent had 4 divine kingdoms that existed side by side. There had been endless disputes and the various tribes had killed each other. The ancient tribe that Ling Xian had been born in had a special innate bloodline that allowed them to grasp rare divine abilities and secret arts. Originally, this ancient tribe had stood aloof from worldly affairs and lived in seclusion. However, the flames of war had spread to this tribe and destroyed its peace and tranquility. A certain empire's army had passed by and discovered the Shadow tribe's innate divine ability. Thus, the empire's army had abducted everyone from the tribe and forced them to join the army and serve the empire. Anyone who resisted had been cruelly killed by the empire's army. The few survivors had no choice but to submit to fate and follow the empire's army. Chapter 2050. On this mainland, every martial saint expert was not simple. All of them had extraordinary experiences or extraordinary backgrounds. As for Ling Xian, he was a peak martial saint and the strongest person in North Underworld Mountain. His life experiences could be said to be legendary. When he was young, his home was destroyed, his parents were all killed, and his entire tribe was destroyed. But he still had to endure the humiliation and be used by his enemies. He fought for the empire and made great contributions. The endless killing and war made him cold-blooded, emotionless, cruel, and numb. At the same time, his bloodline talent was awakened and his strength increased by leaps and bounds. In a short 200 years, he broke through to the martial saint realm and completely awakened his talent and abilities. In the process, he came across a remnant of an ancient demon path secret technique. After cultivating, he realized that the demon path secret technique was very compatible with his talent. They complemented each other and made him a rare genius. The demon path secret technique, the killing and war, and the tragic experiences of his youth made him lose his humanity and fall into the demon path. 300 years later, he killed his enemies with his own hands and slaughtered millions of soldiers. Furthermore, he had single-handedly destroyed that unstable empire and taken revenge for his blood feud. However, his actions had caused public outrage in the divine nation of Taihao, and he had become a devil that everyone wanted to kill. Martial God Vast Divine Kingdom sent out a divine order and sent a large number of divine guards and experts to kill Ling Xian. Ling Xian no longer had a place in the Vast Divine Kingdom. He could only run for his life and leave the Vast Divine Kingdom. During this process, he had gone through many dangerous situations and killed countless powerhouses. Dozens of years later, he finally escaped the pursuit of the Vast Divine Kingdom and hid in the dark and terrifying North Underworld Mountain. It was said that at the beginning he was not accepted by the demon race. After countless battles, he spent 100 years to gain a foothold in North Underworld Mountain. In the next 1,000 years, he tried every possible means to find the complete demon path secret technique. After he mastered the technique, he completely turned into a demon. Also, he used 1,000 years to unify thousands of demon race tribes and became the strongest force in North Underworld Mountain. From then on, no one remembered his identity or name. Everyone only knew that he was the strongest person in North Underworld Mountain, the leader of the 4 great demon saints, the most savage and tyrannical great demon saint. After thousands of years, someone suddenly called out his real name. Moreover, the other party was a young and beautiful human woman. How could Ling Xian not be shocked? His gaze towards the Luo Shui clone was filled with killing intent and fear. The Luo Shui clone's expression remained indifferent as he spoke in an icy tone. Ling Xian, back then you massacred an army of 1 million and destroyed the entire Xianxia Empire. Have you already forgotten such a heinous crime? Great Demon Saint furrowed his brows, his eyes filled with hatred, but he suddenly grinned coldly. So it's about this. Since that's the case, you're the martial saint of the vast divine nation, and you're here to seek revenge? After guessing the identity of the other party, the great demon saint was relieved. He sneered and said, I didn't expect that after thousands of years, Tai Hao still wouldn't give up on hunting me down. But he's old and muddle-headed. He actually sent a woman to break into the North Underworld Mountain to deal with me. Isn't he seeking his own death? After he finished speaking, the Luo Shui clone coldly said, No. You're wrong. This god isn't from the vast divine nation, and I'm not here to settle old scores with you. Great Demon Saint was stunned. He frowned in confusion and asked, Then who are you? The Luo Shui clone coldly said, Luo Li is this god's most valued god official and servant. I've always treated her as my own. You caused her to die tragically in the void and self-destruct. This god has come to the North Underworld Mountain this time to avenge her. Great Demon Saint immediately understood her identity. He couldn't help but tremble as his eyes widened in disbelief. Avenge Luo Li? This god? Are you martial god Luo Shui? After he finished speaking, Great Demon Saint suddenly reacted and quickly shook his head in denial. No, that's impossible. Martial god Luo Shui resides high up in the divine nation and has been cultivating in seclusion. How could she come out of seclusion to seek revenge for a servant? Great Demon Saint looked at the Luo Shui clone in shock and said with certainty, Even if you're martial god Luo Shui, you're definitely not her true body. You must be a clone. The Luo Shui clone didn't deny it and coldly said, That's right, this god's clone has arrived. Great Demon Saint let out a sigh of relief and said with a playful sneer, Martial god Luo Shui is really confident to look down on the North Underworld Mountain. A mere clone dares to barge into my clan's holy city and start a massacre. You even want to seek revenge from this god? It seems that not only will you not be able to take revenge today, but you'll also follow in Luo Li's footsteps and die. The Luo Shui clone wasn't angry and said in a dignified tone, So what if I'm a clone? It's enough to flatten the North Underworld Palace. This god has already destroyed the Saint Devil City. Now it's time for you to be executed. Then the Luo Shui clone waved her palms and sent out a blue light that blotted out the sky toward Great Demon Saint and Third Demon Saint. Whoosh! The blue light that blotted out the sky immediately condensed into 2 hurricanes that were hundreds of miles tall and enveloped the 2 demon saints. Extreme Ice World Annihilation. The enormous icy blue hurricanes spun at an extreme speed and tried to strangle the 2 demon saints. The entire wasteland below the holy mountain was enveloped by extreme ice as if it had been sealed in ice. Originally, there were still tens of thousands of demon race experts who had survived. However, they were sealed by the extreme ice and frost, and their bodies were stiff and couldn't move. The demon race experts who were closer to the 2 demon saints were all enveloped by the icy hurricanes. In the blink of an eye, thousands of demon race experts were ground to dust by the hurricanes. Even Great Demon Saint and Third Demon Saint couldn't escape from the extreme ice hurricanes in a short period of time. The 2 could only use all their strength to cast spells to resist and dispel the hurricanes. Demon Dragon Protection. Great Sky Demon Protection. Sky-splitting demon blade, open for me. The 2 great devil saints roared furiously as they continued to fight in the ice tornado. A full quarter of an hour passed. Great Demon Saint and Third Demon Saint used all their strength and used a few Demon Dao treasures to defeat the 2 hurricanes and escape. The icy blue hurricanes that were hundreds of miles tall shattered into ice shards and scattered on the wasteland. Of course, the 2 demon saints also paid a heavy price. Both of them were covered in wounds and blood and they looked quite miserable. Luo Shui didn't give them a chance to catch their breath and immediately summoned the star divine fire from outer space to shoot down a dozen meteors. Starfall annihilation. More than a dozen huge meteors fell from the sky with dazzling silver flames. Suddenly, the pitch-black demon fog that covered the sky was dispersed by the star divine fire. 1,000 miles around the holy mountain was illuminated by the silver starlight. Chapter 2051. Ordinary martial artists did not even have the right to go to the outer space. No matter how vast the starry sky was, they could only look at it from afar. As for the shooting stars, they were like the wrath of the gods to martial artists below the god realm. Even the great demon Saint Xian and the third demon Saint Tatuo did not dare to go against them. However, at this critical juncture, the two of them joined forces without hesitation and displayed a powerful defensive secret skill. Demon Sky Sacred Umbrella. The two of them faced each other with their palms pressed against each other. Blood-red light surged out of their bodies and an earth-shattering aura erupted. The demonic chi that was drifting in the heavens and earth from all directions gathered together like a flood. In the blink of an eye, a huge demonic chi shield was formed. The dark red light infused into the black shield and increased the power of the shield by a few times, reaching the limit of the martial sage realm. This half-black, half-red barrier not only protected the two demon sages, but also the tens of thousands of surviving demon race elites. In the next moment, dozens of shooting stars that were as dazzling as the sun descended from the sky. Boom, boom, boom. A series of muffled explosions resounded through the sky and shook the earth. Suddenly, the silver star divine fire exploded and flooded the entire wasteland like a torrential flood. The area within a 300-mile radius became chaotic and chaotic. The terrifying star divine flame burned the ground into red lava, which flowed freely. Even the holy mountain at the end of the wilderness was affected. Below the mountainside there were countless ravines and countless rocks collapsed. The godly mountain shook intensely, flashing with a dark red blood-red light and letting out muffled rumbling noises. The heavens and earth were in complete chaos. The protective shield formed by the two great demon saints lasted for 3 breaths of time, blocking the bombardment of the 9 meteors. However, when the 10th shooting star came down, the umbrella-like shield could no longer hold on. With a loud cracking sound, the entire shield fell apart and broke into pieces. When the 11th shooting star came down, the third demon Saint Tatuo was hit and fell to the ground with a scream. When the 12th shooting star came down, the great demon Saint Xian was also hit and fell to the ground from the sky. A huge crater was smashed into the ground, and the soil and sand were burned into magma, bursting with monstrous flames. The 13th meteor came crashing down, blasting thousands of demon race elites into smithereens. Even though the falling meteors had come to an end, the disaster was finally over. However, the torrential sea of flame and raging lava were still wreaking havoc in the wasteland. Only a few thousand demon elites remained, fleeing for their lives towards the sacred mountain. However, how could they escape? The star divine fire and blazing lava attacked, immediately drowning everyone. Regardless of whether it was his physical body or his divine soul, both were turned into ashes in the sea of fire, completely annihilated. What an apocalyptic scene! The wasteland within a radius of 300 miles had completely turned into a dark red sea of lava, with flames rising fiercely. Apart from Xian and Ba Tuo who were lucky enough to survive, everyone else perished in the sea of fire, killed by the meteors. Of course, Xian and Ba Tuo had also suffered serious injuries. When the two of them crawled out of the sea of lava, their bodies were already charred like charcoal, covered in pitch-black blood, and they looked extremely wretched. Not only were their physical bodies severely injured, their divine souls were also severely injured, and their strength had decreased by as much as 30%. What a vicious method! Xian stood in the sky, looking down at the sea of lava and fire below, his eyes bulging with anger, almost bursting with blood. Luo Shui, you lowly slave, North Underworld Mountain will not live under the same sky as you. Ba Tuo looked at this scene in a daze, his eyes wide open, filled with fear and disbelief. He could not help but shake his head, murmuring in a low voice, "This is the method of a martial god expert? With a flick of his finger he can destroy the world." Ba Tuo had never seen a martial god expert attack in his life, so he did not know the powerful methods of a martial god. The strongest person he had ever seen was the great demon Saint Ling Xian. Of course, there was also the ancestor fiend god. Thinking of this, Ba Tuo suddenly came to his senses and hurriedly transmitted his voice. Great demon saint. This lowly woman has already gone crazy and we can't stop her. The only thing we can do now is to ask the ancestor to come out of seclusion to kill her. As soon as Ba Tuo finished speaking, Ling Xian flatly refused and shouted angrily, "No. Absolutely not. The ancestor is in seclusion in the Blood Sea Abyss, comprehending the ancient demonic arts, and is about to break through. If we disturb him at this time, he will definitely fail and all his previous efforts will be for naught." Ba Tuo understood this and said worriedly, "But, if we don't ask the ancestor to come out of seclusion, how should we deal with it?" Ling Xian frowned and thought for a moment. His eyes flashed with determination and he said firmly, "The only thing we can do now is to use the forbidden secret technique to forcefully increase our strength. Also, we can't hide those magic treasures anymore. We must do everything we can to keep this crazy woman busy and not let her destroy North Underworld Palace." Ba Tuo understood his meaning. After a moment of silence, he gritted his teeth and nodded, "All right. We'll do as you say." As soon as he finished speaking, Ba Tuo raised his palms and looked up at the sky, making a gesture of worship. His face was solemn and blood flames surged out of his body. He shouted in a deep voice, "With my Dharma body burning blood spirit. Heavenly demon blessing Azura body." Ba Tuo chanted a long ancient demonic incantation and used all his strength to perform the forbidden secret technique. His blood essence and spiritual power seemed to be boiling, burning with blood-red flames that shot up into the sky. Although this would damage his demonic arts foundation and cause him to lose at least 100 years of cultivation, the technique could only be maintained for 15 minutes. After that, his blood essence would dry up and he would be extremely weak. He would have to recuperate for a few years to recover his strength. However, after performing the burning blood spirit, his combat strength increased by more than 6 times, reaching the limit of the martial sage realm. On the other side, the great demon sage Ling Xian also performed the burning blood spirit. Blood flames surged out of his body and shot up into the sky. His body expanded to 100 feet tall and turned into a huge demon. After burning his blood essence and demonic powers, his strength increased by 6 times. In a short period of time, he had surpassed the martial sage realm and was comparable to an early-stage martial god. Moreover, Ling Xian was a descendant of the ancient shadow tribe and had a special gift. His huge demonic body was like a blurry shadow, appearing and disappearing. It was very unreal. Obviously, not only did he use the burning blood spirit, he also used the shadow tribe's gift. Shadow escape. Ling Xian shouted angrily and his body suddenly disappeared into the sky, hiding in the darkness. In the next moment he suddenly rushed out of the shadows and appeared behind Luo Shui's clone. Dragon-slaying claw. Ling Xian suddenly stretched out his huge claws and grabbed at Luo Shui's clone with a power that could tear everything apart. Luo Shui was already prepared. He immediately turned around and raised his fists to attack. Boom. Chapter 2052. Ling Xian had been sent flying by Luo Shui's punch. However, after flying for 5 kilometers, his body turned into a shadow and strangely disappeared. Luo Shui was about to use his God's Eye to search for Ling Xian's true body. At that moment, Ma Tuo pounced over, wielding a dark red millstone axe in both hands as he swung it down. Sacred demon punishing God. Ma Tuo's entire body surged with blood-red flames, and the simple millstone axe in his hands exuded a divine might that could destroy everything. Such ferocious might was enough to make any martial saint tremble in fear. Aside from martial gods, almost no one could withstand it. After all, the dark red ancient axe in Ma Tuo's hands did not have a simple origin. This axe was called the Heaven's Destroyer, and it was the personal weapon of a demon god from ancient times. That demon god had been a fierce general under the ancestor demon god, and his battle achievements were splendid. He was infamous for his ferocity, and he had killed over 100 gods from various races. The Heaven's Destroyer was even more dangerous, and it was difficult to resist. However, during the ancient War of the Gods, that demon god had been killed by the human race's war god, and he had fallen forever. The Heaven's Destroyer had also been shattered, leaving behind a few cracks that had been left behind on Shenwu continent. The demon axe had been hidden in the abyss for 10,000 years before it finally saw the light of day again, and it had been obtained by a demonic Dao powerhouse. After more than 20,000 years, it had finally landed in Dark North Mountain. 1,000 years ago, Ma Tuo had become the third great demon saint of Dark North Mountain, and he had obtained the Heaven's Destroyer. Although the Heaven's Destroyer had been severely damaged, it could only be considered a top-tier sacred weapon. However, it had once been a divine weapon and it had possessed a terrifying might. Ma Tuo was reluctant to use it unless it was absolutely necessary. At this moment, Ma Tuo was relying on the burning blood deification technique to swing the Heaven's Destroyer at Luo Shui's clone. He was full of confidence and he thought that he could force Luo Shui's clone to retreat or even injure her. However, his knowledge was too shallow and he could not guess how terrifying a martial god powerhouse was. Chaotic explosion. Luo Shui's clone did not use any weapons. Instead, she used her slender hands to continuously wave dazzling light as she used a powerful divine art. Instantly, the sky in a radius of 5 kilometers in front of her twisted and folded, like a crumpled ball of paper. At least 4 layers of space were crushed and kneaded together, forming a light sphere that was 10 miles in radius, and then smashed towards Ba Tuo. Boom! Amidst a deafening explosion, the randomly folded space bomb hit Ba Tuo. Hei Tuo was sent flying backward on the spot. The heaven-slicing war axe also collapsed high into the sky and fell down powerlessly. Not only that, the chaotic and folded power of space was like a sharp blade strangling Ba Tuo. He was strangled until his entire body was dripping with blood and riddled with wounds. He let out a painful shriek. Luo Shui's clone took the opportunity to close in, wanting to kill Ma Tuo in one fell swoop. But at this time the great demon Saint Ling Xian had already gathered his strength and was ready to attack, using a secret technique to attack. Shadow Strike. Following his cold shout, 36 shadows appeared in the sky around Luo Shui, all of them charging towards Luo Shui at the same time. Each shadow was hundreds of meters tall and looked exactly like Ling Xian. Their soul aura and demonic energy fluctuations were also exactly the same. If it were any other martial sage, they would not be able to tell which figure was real and which was fake. But Luo Shui was different. She furrowed her brows and her pitch-black eyes instantly turned dark gold. It was the Divine Eye secret technique. The 36 shadows changed their appearance in her eyes, their disguises immediately torn off. You do have some skill. You actually have 12 real bodies and 24 illusions. Generally speaking, a secret technique like the shadow strike was a smokescreen. Most of the shadows were fake. Only one shadow was real. But Ling Xian's talent was extraordinary and he actually had 12 real bodies. This was truly rare in the world. Luo Shui was not careless. She repeatedly waved her palms and flicked her fingers, shooting out hundreds of starlight swords. Swish, swish, swish. The hundreds of silver starlight swords carried the power to pierce through everything as they ruthlessly stabbed towards the 12 real bodies. As for the 24 illusions, Luo Shui completely ignored them. Seeing this scene, Ling Xian instantly turned pale with fright. His heart was filled with shock and horror. He simply could not believe that Luo Shui could see through his shadow strike in an instant. In his vigilance, he hurriedly withdrew his hand, wanting to dodge the attack. But it was too late to retreat. Bang! Bang, bang, bang. The hundreds of starlight swords pierced the 10 real bodies. A series of muffled sounds rang out as blood and fire splattered all over the sky. Only 2 of the real bodies managed to retreat in time and luckily escaped this calamity. Even so, Ling Xian was still sent flying 30 li away, his body covered in blood as he smashed into the ruins. His and Ba Tuo's injuries were even more severe and they looked even more miserable. But the 2 of them gritted their teeth and desperately held on. The 2 of them consecutively used several sage artifacts and various secret techniques to entangle with Luo Shui. Rumble. Loud explosions rang out continuously in the sky, reverberating endlessly. Various colors of magical power, splendor, blood and fire enveloped hundreds of li of heaven and earth. It was extremely chaotic. This battle lasted for a full hour and it still didn't end. Of course, Luo Shui's clone still had the upper hand despite fighting 2 enemies alone. Even if she was only a clone and only had 20% of the original's strength. but she was the clone of the martial god. She was proficient in various divine arts and secret techniques. Her rich battle experience and deep understanding of the great Tao of heaven and earth were far beyond the two great demon saints. The two of them exchanged thousands of blows and she rarely suffered any setbacks. She was able to counter and neutralize the various secret techniques of the two great demon saints. And the divine Tao secret techniques she used were often able to beat the two great demon saints until they were covered in wounds and suffering unbearable pain. Ba Tuo was the weakest and his injuries were also the most severe. At the end of the battle he was the first to give up. His body collapsed on the spot, turning into a bloody mist. Only a dark purple soul was left, floating in the sky, fleeing towards the divine mountain in a panic. Great demon saint, forgive me for not being able to accompany you any longer. We are not this crazy woman's match at all. I can only ask the progenitor to come out of seclusion. Ba Tuo transmitted his voice to the great demon saint as he fled towards the Beiming Palace at the peak of the divine mountain. The great demon saint's injuries were also very severe. His body was already distorted like a mess of meat and could collapse at any time. But he was using the shadow race's secret technique to support himself, trying his best to prevent his body from being destroyed. He still wanted to entangle Luo Shui's clone. Luo Shui Heavenly Divine Tao. Heavenly Sword. At this moment Luo Shui's clone waved her hands and made a hand seal, using her Divine Tao secret technique, Luo Shui Heavenly Divine Tao. A holy giant sword that was thousands of feet tall and glowing with blue light fell from the sky. Nothing in the world could hide its sharpness or stop its power. The terrifying sword intent was enough to destroy everything. Bam! The great demon saint did not even have the chance to dodge. He was hit by the heavenly sword, and his body exploded into a bloody mist that scattered in all directions. Chapter 2053. That strange divine soul was the great demon saint's divine soul. Luo Shui's eyes were sharp as he stared at the lump of spirit as he coldly shouted. Ling Xian. Today is the day of your death. Don't even think about escaping. Pay with your life for Luo Li. With a cold shout, Luo Shui raised his foot and crossed 50 miles in a single step, catching up to the great devil saint's soul. Sword of Heaven's Wrath. She raised her right hand and used the Luo Shui's heavenly god Tao to summon the power of the stars and slashed out. A giant silver star sword that was thousands of feet tall slashed down from the sky and went straight for the great demon saint's divine soul. Before the giant sword arrived, the great demon saint's divine soul was locked down and had nowhere to run. In the next moment his divine soul was about to be hit by the giant sword and die on the spot. However, at this critical moment, a blood-red dragon that was thousands of feet long flew out from behind the sacred mountain. Roar! The ferocious blood-red dragon raised its head and let out a dragon roar that was filled with murderous intent. It rushed into the sky as fast as an aurora to meet the starry giant sword head-on. Bang! With a deafening sound, the blood-red dragon collided with the giant star sword. Both of them collapsed at the same time and exploded into fragments that covered the sky. The blood-red fragments were like flames and the silver fragments were like starlight. The dark sky within a few hundred miles was illuminated in a dazzling light. A violent shockwave swept across the surrounding 1,000 miles of the sacred mountain and stirred up a hurricane. The towering sacred mountain that was thousands of feet tall was also shaken by the shockwave and let out a loud rumbling sound. The great demon saint and Ma Tuo's divine souls were swept up by the shockwave and smashed into the sacred mountain. Their divine souls were hit and their consciousness became blurry. However, they were already overjoyed to be able to escape from Luo Shui's sword. Primogenitor. Primogenitor saved me. This is great. Primogenitor has finally come out of seclusion. We're saved. The two divine souls floated in the sky above the sacred mountain and looked at the dark sky behind the mountain as they shouted excitedly. Luo Shui also temporarily stopped his pursuit. He stood in the sky with a cold expression, frowning as he looked at the peak of the divine mountain. Ancestral devil god? Was it going to come out of seclusion? I wonder what realm this demon has recovered to. In the next moment, the dark sky behind the sacred mountain suddenly lit up with a bloody light. A gigantic figure slowly rose from the darkness. Boom. Roar. As that incomparably huge figure continued to rise into the sky, a series of loud noises could be heard from behind the divine mountain. All of a sudden, boundless demonic chi erupted, covering a radius of a few thousand miles. This expanse of the heavens and the earth had become pitch black, and it had completely turned into a ghastly and terrifying ghost town. Sensing the powerful aura, Luo Shuai stared at the towering figure as a tinge of fear flashed across his eyes. That incomparably huge figure was over 10,000 meters tall. It was as majestic as a sacred mountain. Its entire body was black and red, and its body was towering and sturdy like an old bear. It also looked like a pitch-black bull demon. Its broad body was like a huge mountain, and its 3 heads reached into the dark clouds, revealing 6 pairs of demonic eyes that flickered with purple light. It had 6 pairs of blade-like wings on its back. They were half black and half red, and they were surrounded by demonic chi. 4 thick and sturdy mountain-like arms seemed to be able to break through the stars. This was the ancestral devil god's body. However, Luo Shuai could vaguely sense that this was not the ancestral devil god's original appearance. She felt that something was amiss. The ancestral devil god seemed to have mastered some kind of secret technique, and its power was in an extremely violent state and it could erupt at any time. At this moment, the ancestral devil god looked down at Luo Shuai's clone and spoke with a booming voice. This god has been silent for too long. The people of the world have already forgotten the name, Death God, and have abandoned fear and reverence. Now even a mere Valkyrie dares to barge into the northern underworld mountain and make an enemy out of this god. Furthermore, this is not the Valkyrie's true body but just a clone. You are looking down on this god. The ancestral devil god's voice was deep and vigorous, as if he was talking to himself. However, it contained a formless power that directly attacked one's soul. As he spoke, the sky and earth within a radius of a few thousand miles undulated along with his aura. Clearly, he had already merged with the heavens and earth within a few thousand miles. Luo Shuai's clone stared at him coldly and said in an icy tone, "Ancestral devil god? Death god? A demon that fell 30,000 years ago. It is already a great fortune that you can be reborn today. If I were you, I would find a place to hibernate and focus on recovering my strength. I would definitely not send out an army to start a war before I have recovered my strength and bring about a fatal disaster." Hearing this, the ancestral devil god's 6 demonic eyes flickered with a sharp, cold light as they stared at Luo Shuai's clone. "Oh, little girl, you know quite a lot about this god's past? You are the divine master of Luo Shui Divine Kingdom, Luo Shui Martial God. When Ji Tianxing was in Luo Shui Divine Kingdom, he received quite a bit of your protection, right?" Luo Shuai's clone was unwilling to talk about this topic and said in a sinister tone, "Devil God, you should feel lucky that only this god's clone has come today. If this god had come personally, you and Baiming Palace would have been annihilated. However, this god has come this time to avenge Luo Li. As long as you hand over the great demon saint's divine soul, I can let you live." The ancestral devil god sneered and said in a mocking tone, "You let this god off the hook. What a joke. 30,000 years ago, all the gods in the world trembled in fear when they heard this god's name. Little girl, you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. You are truly arrogant and ignorant to the extreme. What kind of place do you think Baiming Mountain is? If you really had the ability, you would have flattened Baiming Mountain long ago. Why did you have to endure until now? Furthermore, this god has achieved great success in cultivating the heaven-piercing giant demon physique, and my vitality has recovered by more than half. Since you have taken the initiative to send yourself to death, this god will fulfill your wish." As his voice fell, the ancestral devil god waved his 4 mountain-like arms, and smashed out fist shadows that blotted out the sky towards Luo Shuai's clone. Over 100 fist shadows were blood red, dark purple and pitch black. They contained a monstrous demonic power and their might was terrifying. Luo Shuai immediately sensed that the ancestral devil god's aura was several times stronger than the great demon saint's. It was already comparable to a true martial god expert. She did not dare to be careless, and with a solemn expression she waved her palm to cast a spell. Her slender fingers scattered starlight that filled the sky, and welcomed the 100 fist shadows. The specks of silver light formed tens of thousands of starlight swords, forming a huge sword array. Bang 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 bang. The sword array and fist shadows fiercely collided, and an earth-shattering sound erupted, fiercely reverberating between heaven and earth. Very quickly the starlight swords and fist shadows collapsed. After exchanging a move, both sides were evenly matched, and no one was able to gain an advantage. Chapter 2054. Massacre. The ancestor fiend celestial roared furiously as he waved his 4 gigantic palms, which blotted out the sky towards the Luo Shui clone. The gigantic palms were like blades, emitting bloody and purple light. They were like blades that could cut open the sky, destroying everything. The ancestor fiend celestial's secret techniques all had simple names, but their power was extremely terrifying. This was because he was once the ancestor of the fiend celestial race that controlled the 5 elements world. His martial path had already reached perfection, and he had already abandoned his flashy techniques. Reaching the realm of the Great Tao is the most simple. The bloody blades from the 4 gigantic palms were enough to slaughter all living things. The Luo Shui clone did not dare to underestimate the enemy. He waved his 10 fingers, shooting out hundreds of icy blue water pillars. Virtuous like water, you can do anything you want. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Every water pillar was 5 kilometers long like icy blue ribbons as they danced in the sky. The hundreds of water pillars intertwined, forming a gigantic net that blotted out the sky, covering a radius of dozens of kilometers. The ancestor fiend celestial's attack was extremely domineering and violent. As for the water-type divine power, it was extremely gentle and endless. The 4 gigantic palms that could split the sky and earth struck the icy blue net, creating a world-shaking sound as icy blue water splashed everywhere. The icy blue net was split open and the 200 water pillars were severed, causing a torrential flood to fall. However, the ancestor fiend celestial's attack was blocked by the icy blue net, losing all its power. No one could do anything to the other and it was a tie again. The ancestor fiend celestial roared furiously as he waved his 4 arms again, flapping his 6 pairs of wings, releasing an attack that blotted out the sky. Various spells condensed from bloody and purple light rained down, covering a radius of a few hundred kilometers. The world was in complete chaos and nothing could be seen. Luo Shui could only defend with all her might, using various defensive techniques to neutralize the ancestor fiend celestial's attack. She was a water-type martial god, and was known as the god of Luo Shui. Defense-type secret techniques and ultimate skills were her forte. In 2 hours the ancestor fiend celestial attacked with more than 3,000 moves, sparing no effort. However, Luo Shui blocked and neutralized 90% of the attacks. The remaining 10% of the spells that hit her did not cause too much damage, only slightly injuring her. Previously I fought with Ling Xian and Ba Tuo for quite a long time and used up a lot of my magic power. Now the ancestor fiend celestial is attacking with all his might. I can only defend and neutralize his attacks. Fierce attacks like this consumes a lot of his energy. I've already been fighting with it for half an hour. I believe that it won't be long before its strength is exhausted. At that time I will have a chance to defeat it and kill Great Devil Saint Ling Xian. Luo Shui as the Luo Shui clone fought Fiend Celestial. She was the Fiend Celestial, and was the Fiend Celestial and was the Fiend God now. Luo Fai 2 hours passed. She exchanged another few thousand moves with the ancestral Fiend God and the battle was extremely intense. The sky and sun and was the sun and the sun Lewis. Everything within a radius of 800 miles around the sacred mountain had turned into scorched earth and ruins. The wastelands, craters, mountain ranges and peaks were all reduced to dust. Even half of the 10,000-meter-tall divine mountain had collapsed, and a great amount of earth and rocks had collapsed. If not for the ancestor Fiend Celestial protecting the Lulyalos, the 10,000-meter-tall peak would have been reduced to dust. After 2 hours of intense fighting, Luo Shui's clone's injuries were even more severe. Her body was covered in blood and one of her arms had been cut off. Her strength was greatly weakened. On the other hand, the ancestor Fiend Celestial was still full of power, and showed no signs of exhaustion. He had already gained the upper hand and was in complete control of the situation. He used a barrage of attacks to suppress Luo Shui's clone, preventing her from counterattacking or escaping. Luo Shui's clone realized that she was not the ancestor Fiend Celestial's match. If she continued fighting, she would only die. After all, the ancestor Fiend Celestial had recovered a lot of his strength, and he had the geographical advantage. If she left North Underworld Mountain, she might have a chance to fight the Ancestor Fiend Celestial for 3,000 rounds and win. But now, the Ancestor Fiend Celestial was at the peak of the Lulyalos, with the Blood Sea Abyss behind him, and his strength had greatly increased. With the Blood Sea Abyss providing him with power, he had an endless supply of it. In the Lulyalos and the Blood Sea Abyss, the Ancestor Fiend Celestial was invincible. Unless Luo Shui Martial God's true body came, there was no chance of victory. No, I can't continue fighting with the Ancestor Fiend Celestial, or I will die here. Although this is only my clone, it was forged from my soul and blood essence. It took me 9 years to complete, and I also used 6 divine-grade materials. However, I have come to avenge Luo Li. Even if I want to leave, I have to kill the great fiend celestial Ling Xian first. Luo Shui's clone made up her mind. As she fought with the Ancestor Fiend Celestial, she searched for Ling Xian's whereabouts. Soon, her divine sense found that Ling Xian's soul had hidden in North Underworld Palace. The North Underworld Palace at the peak of the mountain was extremely solemn and dignified, and it had even set up a powerful defensive sacred array. After exchanging 2 blows with the Ancestor Fiend Celestial, Luo Shui's clone took the opportunity to escape from the Ancestor Fiend Celestial's clutches, and rushed to the peak of the Lulyalos. Whoosh! She turned into an icy blue stream of light and formed a huge sword, thrusting towards North Underworld Palace. Inside North Underworld Palace, Ling Xian was hiding in a heavily guarded secret room, treating his injuries with all his might. As the huge sword thrusted down, a formless icy aura enveloped the peak of the mountain. Ling Xian sensed it and knew that a calamity was about to befall him. He was immediately shocked and furious and hurriedly burrowed into the ground, trying to hide. At the same time, the Ancestor Fiend Celestial standing behind the Lulyalos sneered in a mocking tone. "Ha! Luo Shui, you have finally taken the bait." As he spoke, the Ancestor Fiend Celestial quickly waved his 4 arms, sending out a blood light that covered the sky. Extermination of all life. Following the Ancestor Fiend Celestial's cold shout, the dark sky around North Underworld Palace suddenly lit up with a soaring blood light. In the blink of an eye, a super-large array with a radius of 500 miles rapidly appeared. This light barrier that covered the sky was dark purple, and it flickered with hundreds of blood dragon shadows, as well as thousands of Asuras and evil demons' phantoms. Kill! The Ancestor Fiend Celestial waved his 4 arms and controlled the power of the large array, ruthlessly suppressing Luo Shui's clone. A formless power that could destroy the world attacked from all directions, immediately enveloping the huge icy blue sword. Ka-cha! With a crisp explosion, the huge icy blue sword crumbled on the spot, shattering into pieces that filled the sky. Luo Shui's clone appeared, covered in blood as she fell to the ground, heavily crashing into the square in front of North Underworld Palace. A deep pit was created in the square that was paved with solid black stones, with countless pieces of stone flying everywhere. Her body was bent over in the pit as she tried her best to raise her head to look at the sky, dark red blood gushing out of her mouth and nose. Chapter 2055. Luo Shui's clone was already heavily injured. Now that she was imprisoned by the life extermination array, her injuries were even more severe and she was at the end of her tether. She glared at the Ancestor Fiend Celestial, her eyes filled with hatred and killing intent. The Ancestor Fiend Celestial looked down at her from above and sneered, "Luo Shui, don't blame me for being despicable. You are just too stupid and too impulsive. This sacred mountain is the sacred land of my clan, and Baiming Palace is my resting place. How can I not set up a powerful array? For 30,000 years, my clan has been living in seclusion in Baiming Mountain recuperating. Even if the divine martial continent's various races and divine kingdoms change, it will not affect my clan. Do you know why? My clan has been living in seclusion. This is one of the reasons. But most importantly, it is because Baiming Mountain's terrain is treacherous and the environment is vile. Every step is filled with danger and danger. Especially around the sacred mountain and the sacred city, we have set up an inescapable net. Even a martial sage would have to return in defeat." The Ancestor Fiend Celestial looked as if victory was already in his hands, his eyes filled with pride. He was not in a hurry to kill Luo Shui's clone, but said slowly, previously you destroyed the sacred city and killed your way to the sacred mountain. You are truly awe-inspiring and invincible. I don't want to activate the sacred array. It can't stop you at all and will only be a waste of time. Only the divine array on the sacred mountain can trap you and kill you. There was no doubt that the great formation of annihilation was a genuine divine formation. And it was an ancient demonic array that had once killed the various races' divine spirits. When Luo Shui's clone heard this, she was even more enraged and her killing intent surged. She glared at the ancestor fiend celestial and said in a sinister tone, "No wonder you have been hiding on the sacred mountain and never showed yourself. It turns out that you are relying on the protection of the divine array and the power of the blood sea abyss to recover your vitality. But don't be too proud. I have already figured out Biming Mountain's situation. Today I have lost this clone. When my true body arrives, I will definitely flatten Biming Palace." After saying that, she slowly stood up and walked towards the sky with her back ramrods straight. Ancestral Devil God looked down at her and sneered, "That's right, you are the famous Luo Shui martial god. If you were here in your true form, I wouldn't be a match for you. However, in the next few decades, you won't come out of seclusion at all. Otherwise, your years of bitter cultivation will be wasted." In order to avenge his maid, not only did he have to destroy a clone, he even had to destroy hundreds of years of cultivation. What a joke. The Luo Shui clone said expressionlessly, "Cut the crap. Do you really think that you can easily kill me with this divine formation? How laughable. Your true strength is only at the peak of the martial sage realm. You are still far from the deity realm. Even if I have to abandon this clone today, I won't let you off easily." With that, the Luo Shui clone clasped his hands together in front of his chest and closed his eyes with a solemn expression. He began to circulate his magic power and use his final trump card. Starfall. Her entire body lit up with an ice-blue brilliance that soared into the sky. She was burning with a fierce silver star fire, and her body swelled up violently. Without a doubt, the Luo water clone was about to self-destruct. The ancestral Fian Celestial's expression immediately changed. His 6 eyes were filled with deep fear and wariness. He hurriedly waved his 6 arms and absorbed the power of the blood sea abyss. He frantically poured it into the divine formation, desperately suppressing the Luo Shui clone. He could only try to resist and neutralize it. He could not escape. Otherwise, the self-destruction of the Luo Shui clone would definitely destroy the entire divine mountain and Biming Palace. At the same time, the many demonic Dao experts in Biming Palace, as well as the souls of Ling Xian and Ba Tuo, all entered the divine artifact and fled the divine formation as if their lives depended on it. They all fled towards the blood sea abyss in a panic, seeking the protection of the ancestral fiend celestial. The next moment, the Luo Shui clone transformed into a resplendent full moon, releasing the most dazzling brilliance in the sky. Boom! An earth-shaking explosion shook the universe. The momentum was terrifying to the extreme. Endless star fire and ice-blue brilliance rose up like a mushroom cloud, illuminating the surrounding thousands of kilometers as if it was daytime. Even the divine formation of annihilation of the world could not withstand the terrifying might of the self-destruction. The massive barrier of light of the formation crumbled with cracking sounds, numerous cracks appearing on it. Within the formation, more than half of Biming Palace at the peak of the divine mountain had been destroyed. Many of the palaces, pavilions and walls had been reduced to rubble, leaving behind countless bricks and broken walls. The peak of the mountain was a mess. The entire divine mountain shook violently, several ravines appearing on it. It had almost collapsed. Several hundred demonic Dao experts that could not escape in time were all killed on the spot, blown to smithereens. Even the ancestral fiend celestial that controlled the divine formation swayed from the impact. Cracks appeared on his chest and neck, causing a rain of blood to rain down. The intense pain caused him to roar at the sky. He was so furious that he almost went mad. The self-destruction of the Luo Shui clone had destroyed the divine formation. The ancestral fiend celestial had used his heart's blood, demonic creatures and talismans to set up this divine formation. The divine formation was connected to his soul. Now that the divine formation had been destroyed, he obviously suffered a backlash. Not only was his body heavily injured, his soul was also severely damaged. After a long while, the earth-shaking explosions gradually dissipated. The dust and starlight that filled the world also gradually disappeared. Everything was over. The world calmed down. Everything within a radius of 1,000 miles had been reduced to rubble. It was a scene of devastation and dust. The divine mountain that was covered in cracks stood alone among the rubble. The peak of the divine mountain was also in ruins. The ground was a mess. The ancestral fiend celestial stood in the sky, looking down at this scene. He was furious and pained. Saint Devil City had been destroyed. Over 2 million demonic Dao citizens had been killed. Countless elite experts and experts had been killed. Even the divine mountain had been destroyed. More than half of Baiming Palace had been destroyed. Such heavy losses were a huge blow to the demonic Dao. It would take many years for them to recover their strength. After a long while, Ling Xian and Ba Tuo's souls flew out of the blood sea abyss and landed beside the ancestral fiend celestial. The two of them had survived the calamity. They secretly rejoiced, but they still had lingering fears. Ancestral fiend celestial, this subordinate has failed. Ancestral fiend celestial, please punish me. Ancestral fiend celestial, this subordinate was unable to stop that crazy woman. The ancestral fiend celestial endured his injuries and said in a dignified tone, Luo Shui has personally sent her avatar for revenge. You are not her match. It is normal for you to be defeated. Fortunately, her avatar has been destroyed. Her main body will also be implicated. She will not come for revenge in the short term. Quickly gather the chiefs and leaders of the various large tribes and arrange for the rebuilding of the Divine Mountain and the reconstruction of the Divine Holy City. This god had a huge battle and has greatly damaged my vitality. I still need to recuperate for a few years. I cannot be disturbed. Ling Xian and Ba Tuo's souls hurriedly complied. After hesitating for a while, Ba Tuo carefully asked, Ancestral Fiend Celestial, this subordinate and great demon sage's bodies have been destroyed. I'm afraid it will take 100 years, the Ancestral Fiend Celestial said in a low voice. After you have arranged for the reconstruction, enter the Blood Sea Abyss. This god will personally heal your injuries and help you recover your avatars. Chapter 2056. For the sake of convenience, the great demon saint and Ba Tuo's divine soul temporarily resided in two demonic objects. One transformed into a black robe and demonic fog, while the other resided in a demonic sword and appeared as a phantom. The two of them informed the various major tribes and gathered 8 demon monarchs, 6 tribal chiefs, and hundreds of thousands of demon soldiers. Under the arrangement of the 2 demon saints, the demon monarchs and tribal chiefs led the soldiers to rebuild Saint Devil City. Even the damaged Sacred Mountain and Baiming Palace were being repaired day and night. According to everyone's estimation, it would take at least 3 months to complete the reconstruction of Saint Devil City. On the other hand, the Sacred Mountain and Baiming Palace only needed 2 months to be repaired. Of course, after this disaster, the demon race's vitality was greatly damaged, and their strength was not as strong as before. Especially with the destruction of Saint Devil City, the damage to the Sacred Mountain and Baiming Palace, it was a huge blow to the demon race's morale. Even if Saint Devil City was rebuilt, it would take many years for it to return to its former glory. After arranging all the matters, the 2 demon saints entered the Blood Sea Abyss to receive the ancestral fiend god's secret treatment. To the ancestral fiend god, the most precious thing was time. If the 2 demon saints were to enter seclusion to recover, it would take at least 100 years. Could not wait that long. Therefore, it would use the ancient demon secret technique to refine the great demon saint and Ba Tuo into puppets, just like how it treated the Azura demon saint. In this way, the great demon saint and Ba Tuo's future would be destroyed, and they would never be able to break through to the god realm. But the ancestral fiend god did not care, it only needed to buy time. In a short 10 years, it would be able to recover to the god realm and dominate the world. As for the life and death of the demon saints and their future, it was not within its consideration. Unknowingly, 10 days passed in a flash. Ji Tianxing had been staying in the Luotian mountain, cultivating in seclusion in the Cloud Water Palace's secret chamber. His strength had already reached the peak of the 8th stage of the tribulation passing realm, and he could sense the arrival of the heavenly tribulation. These 10 days of closed-door cultivation had made his martial arts foundation even more solid. He also had greater confidence in facing the unknown heavenly tribulation. On the morning of the 11th day, he finally ended his cultivation and walked out of the secret chamber. Just as he walked out of the Cloud Water Palace, he saw a few guards and maids gathered together, whispering. The guards and maids were chatting passionately, and their emotions were also quite excited. Hey, have you guys heard? Our Divine Master caused a ruckus in the North Underworld Mountain? Of course I've heard about it. This news came from the North Underworld Mountain, and it has already spread throughout the 3 divine kingdoms, right? Exactly. The Divine Master only used an avatar to destroy the Saint Devil City and sacred mountain of the demon race. He even destroyed the Beiming Palace. This is shocking news. That's right. Who do you think our Divine Master is? Just by sending an avatar into North Underworld Mountain, the devil race will suffer heavy casualties and wails everywhere. If that happens, the war situation in the north will also be affected. The aggressive demons will definitely suffer great losses and their morale will plummet. Yes. The Divine Master's method is too satisfying. I'm just puzzled. Why doesn't the Divine Master personally enter the North Underworld Mountain? He would definitely be able to annihilate the entire demon race in one fell swoop. Sigh, I used to think so too, but the Lord God is a deity. How can we, mere mortals, guess her thoughts? The guards and maids were chatting enthusiastically and did not notice Ji Tianxing's approach. Until the golden dragon suddenly appeared and stared at everyone with a solemn expression. Only then did the few guards and maids hurriedly shut their mouths and disperse like birds and beasts. The golden dragon walked quickly to Ji Tianxing and bowed. Subordinate greets young master. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked, Golden Dragon, what happened? From what they said, it seems that the Luoshui martial god sent an avatar to cause a ruckus in the North Underworld Mountain. The golden dragon did not dare to conceal anything and answered truthfully, Young master, that's right. After divine official Luo Li died, the divine master was very sad. In order to avenge divine official Luo, he sent an avatar into the North Underworld Mountain and started a massacre. Not only was the Saint Devil City destroyed, more than 2 million demons lost their lives. Even the sacred mountain and Beiming Palace of the demon race were heavily damaged. It is said that the demon race lost countless elite experts and powerhouses. Even 2 great demon saints had their avatars destroyed and almost lost their lives. The golden dragon's words were very pertinent and did not exaggerate at all. Ji Tianxing frowned and a strange look flashed in his eyes. He nodded silently. I know. The golden dragon hurriedly bowed and changed the topic, asking, Young master, I heard from master that your heavenly tribulation is near. Why did you come out instead of cultivating in the secret room? Ji Tianxing smiled and said indifferently, The heavenly tribulation will descend today. Hearing this, the golden dragon's expression changed and he hurriedly bowed. Please don't blame me, young master. I will go and prepare to clear the place. I wish young master a smooth heavenly tribulation. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said indifferently, No need to clear the place. If everyone wants to see me pass the heavenly tribulation, then let them. After saying this, he stepped out of the Cloud Water Palace and walked toward the solitary cloud peak at the back of the mountain. The morning sun had just risen and the steep solitary cloud peak stood alone in the back of the mountain. Ji Tianxing walked through the buildings and palaces and crossed the square. He walked leisurely toward the solitary cloud peak, attracting the attention of countless people. Many disciples of the Luoshan mountain were surprised and curious when they saw him suddenly appear. Seeing him go to the solitary cloud peak, everyone guessed something and hurriedly followed to see what was going on. Half an hour later, Ji Tianxing arrived at the solitary cloud peak. He sat cross-legged on the mountain peak and closed his eyes to adjust his breathing, merging with the heaven and earth. Gray clouds quickly gathered in the sky in all directions, and a violent hurricane started to blow. The wind and clouds met and the sky immediately darkened, blocking the morning sun. Such a change in heaven and earth naturally attracted the attention of countless people. When the disciples, guards, and maids saw the change in the sky, they immediately cried out in alarm. Heavens! The heavenly tribulation is about to descend. Which senior brother or senior sister is going through the heavenly tribulation? This heavenly anomaly is very unusual. I just heard that young Master Ji is back. He is on the solitary cloud peak. What? Eldest senior brother is back? He is going to pass the heavenly tribulation? Oh my God. It has only been 2.5 years since eldest senior brother went through the heavenly tribulation. He is going to go through the heavenly tribulation again? It's too scary. As expected of eldest senior brother. As expected of the number one genius of the kingdom of gods. What are you all waiting for? Let's go to the solitary cloud peak to see what is going on. Eldest senior brother and senior sister have always been benevolent and will not stop us. We can watch them go through the heavenly tribulation. In the various palaces of the Luotian mountain, similar discussions constantly sounded. Countless young disciples, guards, and maids rushed to the solitary cloud peak to watch Ji Tianxing go through the heavenly tribulation. At the same time, Ji Tianxing looked up at the pitch-black sky and looked at the tribulation cloud vortex with a deep gaze. He thought to himself, the first 8 bolts of heavenly tribulation were ordinary. I wonder what kind of test the 9th bolt of heavenly tribulation will be. Chapter 2057. The boundless gray clouds soon formed a huge vortex of tribulation clouds. Around solitary cloud peak the sky became dark and a fierce wind blew. The changes in the sky attracted many disciples and guards to stand around solitary cloud peak to watch. Ji Tianxing stood at the peak of the mountain with a calm expression, welcoming the arrival of the heavenly tribulation. Boom! An earth-shattering sound of thunder rang out. 9 dazzling lightning pillars struck down from the vortex of tribulation clouds. The lightning was dazzling and powerful. 9 bolts of heavenly lightning struck down at the same time, tearing apart the darkness and illuminating a few hundred miles. The invisible heavenly might enveloped the entire Luotian mountain, causing the air to stagnate. Everyone's hearts were filled with fear. Ji Tianxing was fearless. He waved his palms and struck out a dazzling golden light, forming a huge vortex to resist the bombardment of the heavenly lightning. Boom, boom, boom. After a series of dull sounds, the 9 bolts of heavenly lightning were swallowed by the golden vortex. Not long after, another deafening clap of thunder exploded. Boom! A total of 18 bolts of heavenly lightning struck down from the vortex of tribulation clouds, carrying endless heavenly might as they struck at Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing used the same trick again. Once again he unleashed a golden vortex to block the heavenly lightning's attack and devoured it. When the heavenly lightning struck for the 3rd time, there were 36 bolts. But the result was the same. Ji Tianxing easily blocked the heavenly lightning and devoured it. When the heavenly lightning struck for the 4th time, not only did the number double but it also reached 72 bolts. Even the color of the lightning pillars changed and they were arranged into a formation, containing the power of the heaven and earth divine array. The 5th and 6th heavenly lightning strikes were the same, reaching 144 and 288 bolts respectively. The power of the heavenly lightning had doubled and reached the level of destroying the world. The terrifying heavenly might caused the surrounding disciples and guards to turn pale with fright. Cold sweat broke out all over their bodies. But Ji Tianxing was still calm as usual. He dealt with it calmly and successfully resolved it in the end. After the 6 bolts of heavenly lightning, the vortex of tribulation clouds began to change. 100 breaths later, the vortex of tribulation clouds turned blood red, and a blood-red bolt of heavenly lightning struck down. The inner demon tribulation had arrived. Ji Tianxing accepted it calmly. Immediately he was struck by the blood-red heavenly lightning and fell into an illusion. The enormous ball of dark red light wrapped around him like a cocoon and floated in the air. Peace was restored between heaven and earth. Many spectators were quietly watching the blood-red ball of light. Time passed quietly. Unknowingly 2 hours passed. These 2 hours seemed to be extremely long for everyone. Fortunately, the blood-red light finally dissipated. Ji Tianxing's figure reappeared and he woke up safely. Many disciples and guards revealed expressions of relief. However, before everyone could cheer for Ji Tianxing, the 8th tribulation of wind and fire descended. The heavenly wind and astral fire enveloped Ji Tianxing, burning his body violently. The mysterious pitch-black soul flame kept pouring into his mind, burning his sea of consciousness and divine soul. He was enduring great suffering and pain, but he still had to use the tribulation of wind and fire to temper his body and divine soul in pursuit of perfection. Even if his body was burned until it was distorted and his skin and flesh turned into black ash, he still clenched his teeth and did not make a sound. An hour later the tribulation of wind and fire finally ended. Ji Tianxing's body had also recovered. After being strengthened, it had become even stronger. The vortex of tribulation clouds began to change again. It sped up and turned into a dark gold color. He finally welcomed the 9th bolt of heavenly lightning. This was the last bolt of heavenly lightning of the 9 stages of heavenly tribulation, and it was also the ultimate test. If he could successfully pass it, he would be completely reborn and transcend mortality. But if he could not pass it, he would die in the tribulation and all his previous efforts would be in vain. Ji Tianxing's face became serious. He looked up at the sky with burning eyes, staring at the vortex of tribulation clouds. Before the heavenly lightning descended, the vortex of tribulation clouds emitted an invisible heavenly might that enveloped an area of 100 miles. The air froze. Heaven, earth, and space also came to a standstill. Ji Tianxing was suppressed. It was as if a pair of big hands were pressing him to the ground, and he could not move at all. He immediately frowned and muttered doubtfully, "There's actually such a powerful heavenly might. It seems that the power of this bolt of heavenly lightning is extremely terrifying." After about 10 breaths of time, a thunderous sound that shook the universe was heard. Kaboom! A dark gold bolt of heavenly lightning suddenly struck down from the vortex of tribulation clouds. That bolt of heavenly lightning was thousands of feet long and about 100 meters thick. It was like a huge golden dragon. The strange thing was that the dark gold lightning beam was mixed with thousands of wisps of white light. Not only was Ji Tianxing puzzled, but the surrounding disciples and guards were also confused and puzzled. No one had seen such a bolt of heavenly lightning before. They only found it novel and strange. Ji Tianxing also became vigilant. He held the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand and slashed at the golden bolt of heavenly lightning. Bang! The huge sword light collided with the bolt of heavenly lightning and exploded with a dull sound. The bolt of heavenly lightning was unscathed. It was not damaged at all. However, the huge sword light instantly collapsed. The sword of burial of heaven also trembled and buzzed. Ji Tianxing was hit by the impact. His feet sank into the rock layer. His body also trembled violently and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. In the next moment, the golden bolt of heavenly lightning struck him and drowned his figure. Zhoosh! The golden bolt of heavenly lightning turned into a ball of light and tightly wrapped Ji Tianxing. It hung motionlessly in the sky. Ji Tianxing's consciousness gradually blurred. Soon he fell into a strange illusion. This illusory realm was like a pitch-black and boundless void. He stood alone in the void. He could neither see the sky nor the ground, and there was nothing around him. However, he was not in a hurry and did not act rashly. He stopped in place and thought silently. In the previous 8 heavenly tribulations I went through the 7 emotions, reincarnation, spacetime, 5 elements, heaven and earth, yin and yang, stars and karma. What kind of test is this 9th heavenly tribulation? With the experience of the previous 8 heavenly tribulations, he had long guessed that the test of each heavenly tribulation would be more and more difficult. The test of the 9th heavenly tribulation was definitely the most difficult and the most profound. As expected, when he casually took a step forward, 2 silver doors of light immediately appeared in the dark void in front of him. In the door of light on the left, the scene constantly changed. It showed him failing the heavenly tribulation, blood spurting out of his orifices, and his divine soul collapsing and dying. The scene in the door of light on the right was the scene of him successfully passing the heavenly tribulation, being baptized by divine power and shining brightly. This is something that is about to happen. It concerns my future fate. Could this heavenly lightning test have something to do with my future and fate? Ji Tianxing frowned and thought for a moment. Then he stepped into the door of light on the right. Zhoosh! After crossing this door of light, he saw 4 more doors of light in the void in front of him. Chapter 2058. The images in the 4 light doors were different and represented different choices. Or rather, it indicated that he was about to take a different path. In the first light door, after he had successfully passed the tribulation, he had secluded himself in the Luotian mountain to cultivate and break through to the martial sage realm. However, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains was divided internally and the top powers of the demon race took the opportunity to invade. In the end, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains fell apart and was destroyed. In the second light door, after he had successfully passed the tribulation, His strength had increased tremendously and he had confidently killed his way into the North Underworld Mountain to fight the ancestor demon god. Originally he had thought that after the Luo Shui clone had caused havoc in the North Underworld Mountain, the North Underworld Mountain would be greatly weakened and he would definitely succeed. In the end he was still not the ancestor demon god's match and was cruelly killed. In the third light door, after he had successfully passed the tribulation, he had returned to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and worked hard to cultivate. After 10 years he had finally broken through to the martial sage realm and the Pillar of Heaven's mountain's power had increased greatly. Then he had gone to the North Underworld Mountain to seek revenge, but he had discovered that the North Underworld Mountain had already recovered and the ancestor demon god had also broken through to the divine realm. He, Yunyao and everyone in the Pillar of Heaven's mountains had been easily killed. As for the fourth light door, it was messy and blurry. It was hard to grasp. Ji Tianxing carefully looked at the images in the 4 light doors and finally understood everything. Every light door is equivalent to a turning point in my fate. Once I make the wrong choice, my fate will change and I may even die. It seems that the ultimate test of the 9th tribulation is the choice of fate. Ji Tianxing muttered to himself and a playful smile appeared on his face. Indeed. Fate is the most mysterious and unpredictable power in the world. Not to mention the martial sages and martial gods, even the supreme beings in the upper realm cannot truly control their own fate. However, I have never believed in fate. I only believe that everything depends on human effort. The so-called fate is controlled and created by oneself. If an ordinary person was faced with such a test, they would be at a loss and would not know what to do. They would either make the wrong choice in a muddle-headed state or be afraid to move forward. However, Ji Tianxing was different. He had once reached the peak of the martial way and controlled the people of the world. Even though he had not taken the final step and broken through the shackles of fate. However, his knowledge was more profound than the ocean, his wisdom was more resolute than the earth, and his ambition was greater than the starry sky. After being reborn, he absolutely did not believe in the arrangement of fate. If the heavens decided that he would die prematurely or fall midway, he would defy the heavens and change his fate. After a long time, Ji Tianxing collected his thoughts and made up his mind. Once I make a choice and step into a door of light, more doors of light will appear, leading to more choices and tests. If this goes on, I will face more and more unknown choices, and the situation will become more and more difficult. If he took a wrong step, his life would be in danger. If you take the right path, you will also fall into an endless cycle of choices, and you will not know when the end will be. He even thought of a question. No matter which path he chose, the end result would be death. As such, he wasn't willing to submit to fate's arrangements, nor did he want to step through the door of light and make a choice. He chose to rebel against the shackles of fate. He abruptly raised his right fist and unleashed the star-shattering fist with all his might, slamming it into one of the light gates. Boom! The huge golden fist hit the door of light with a loud bang, causing a deafening explosion. Instantly, the door of light trembled and countless cracks appeared on it. Even the image in the door of light became blurry and gradually dissipated. Ji Tianxing did not stop and once again he slammed his palm into the door of light. Boom! The huge golden light blade slammed into the door of light with a loud bang. The door of light collapsed on the spot, shattering into countless silver light fragments and scattering in the void. After destroying one of the doors of light, Ji Tianxing continued to attack and destroyed the remaining 3 doors of light. When all 4 doors of light were destroyed, he returned to his previous position with a swoosh. He was still standing in the void with 2 doors of light standing in front of him. One was to fail the tribulation and die miserably. The other was to succeed the tribulation and receive the heavenly axiom's reward. However, he did not choose any of the doors of light and repeatedly used his ultimate sword techniques to shatter the 2 doors of light. Swoosh! When the 2 doors of light disappeared, he was also sent out of the dark void by an invisible force. In the next moment he woke up from the illusion and opened his eyes. The dark golden brilliance that enveloped him had already dissipated. He stood on solitary cloud peak unscathed, and the cheers and shouts of the crowd rang in his ears. That's great. Young Master Ji has succeeded in his tribulation. Eldest senior brother is so heaven-defying. He actually passed the unprecedented 9th tribulation. He's definitely a peerless genius. The #1 genius of all time. In terms of talent, only eldest senior sister can compare to him. I wonder which tribulation eldest senior brother is going to pass this time? I heard that 2.5 years ago he was in the second stage of the tribulation stage. Now he should be in the third stage of the tribulation stage, right? You're really ignorant. I heard from the elders that eldest senior brother has already reached the 7th stage of the tribulation stage. What? With today's tribulation, doesn't that mean he's in the 8th stage of the tribulation stage? In just 3 years he has passed 6 tribulations. How can there be such a heaven-defying genius? Crazy. They're all crazy. Even if you search through tens of thousands of years of history, you can't find such a genius. Is he still human? He's a god. All kinds of discussions, exclamations and shouts converged from all directions. The surging sound waves reverberated in the sky for a long time without dissipating. Xianxia looked indifferent as he stood quietly on solitary cloud peak, accepting the baptism of the heavenly ways reward. The tribulation cloud vortex dissipated and turned into a sacred golden light, which descended from the sky and enveloped him. Swoosh! The sacred golden light enveloped him, cleansed his body and soul and quickly strengthened his strength. After a full 15 minutes, the sacred golden light dissipated. Xianxia's tribulation was completely over. His strength had increased by about 4 times, and he had reached the 9th stage of the tribulation stage. He had passed the 9 trials of the heavenly way and was about to become an extraordinary martial sage who could look down on all living beings. From now on, his path of martial arts would be smooth and there would be no more tribulations or bumps. His heart was comforted, but he was not too excited. This was because he knew that passing the 9 stages of tribulation was not the end, but a new beginning. Next, he needed to work harder in his cultivation and break through the shackles as soon as possible to reach the martial sage realm. Only by becoming a martial sage could he cultivate the 7th and 8th stages of the path of the sword spirit and cultivate the absolute saint sword body, which would allow him to traverse the void and control 10,000 swords. That was Kenshin's secret technique, the essence of the path of the sword. Furthermore, only by becoming a martial sage would he have the qualifications to roam the Shenwu continent and resolve all grievances. After pondering for a moment, Xianxia left solitary cloud peak and flew across the sky, returning to Cloud Water Palace. Chapter 2059. In the secret chamber of the Cloud Water Palace. Xianxia sat on the spiritual jade throne with his eyes closed as he cultivated and consolidated his martial arts realm. After 3 days of cultivation and adjustment, his spiritual power and spiritual soul were in perfect harmony. His strength at the 9th level of the cross-calamity realm was also consolidated and strengthened. 3 days later he did not stop cultivating. He continued to cultivate the Sword Soul Dao. He had already cultivated the Sword Soul Path to level 6. This was the sword principle divine skill that he had created in his previous life. Now that he was cultivating it again, he was able to achieve twice the results with half the effort. He used 5 days to cultivate the Sword Soul Path to level 6 to perfection. This was to consolidate the foundation of the sword principle and prepare for the future. After all, once he broke through the martial sage realm and began to cultivate the Sword Soul Path to level 7, there would be a qualitative leap. At that time he would be able to restore the glory of Kenshin and display the best sword principle in the world. Late at night on the 10th day, Xianxia ended his cultivation. He did not leave the secret chamber. Instead he sent his spiritual soul into the Kenshin tomb. Swoosh! The white spiritual soul with a hint of gold came to the dark and cold wasteland. The spiritual soul took on his appearance and flew across the sky. Soon he arrived in the depths of the wasteland and landed in front of the 18 tombstones. He had not entered the Kenshin tomb for a long time. Although the Sword Soul Path cultivation method was engraved on the tombstones and he had already memorized it deep in his soul. But he still wanted to take a look. The 9 tombstones on the left were still empty. On the 6th tombstone on the right, a few lines of small words appeared clearly. It was the mental cultivation method of the Sword Soul Path to level 6. Xianxia stood in front of the tombstones and muttered softly, "When I cultivate the Sword Soul Path to level 9 and reach the martial god realm, the 18 tombstones will show new content. At that time my revenge will begin. Only when I reach the martial god realm will I be qualified to investigate what happened back then and take revenge." As he spoke, he slowly stretched out his hand and pressed on the third tombstone. Suddenly, the tombstone lit up with dense golden light and enveloped him. Swoosh! With a flash, Ji Tianxing's figure disappeared, sucked into a mysterious space. Obviously, the third tombstone was the same as the first two. It had an internal space. This mysterious space seemed to be above the heavens, surrounded by a sea of white clouds. In front of Ji Tianxing was a suspended white jade stone bridge that led to the depths of the sea of clouds. He stepped across the stone bridge and walked into the sea of clouds. Then he saw a sacred and majestic pagoda standing in front of him. The pagoda was 300 meters tall, and its entire body was gilded with gold, making it look resplendent. On the lintel of the door there were 3 simple and unadorned characters. Divine Array Pavilion. Ji Tianxing was no stranger to this, and he even felt a strong sense of familiarity in his heart. After all, he was the one who had designed and built all of these back then. In the Divine Array Pavilion, he had collected all the Divine Array secret techniques and array diagrams that he had obtained throughout his life. All books, documents, techniques, and materials related to arrays could be found in the Divine Array Pavilion. Ji Tianxing walked to the bottom of the pagoda and pushed open the door carved with dragons and phoenixes. After passing through the door, he entered a spacious hall. Even though it had been sealed for thousands of years, the hall was still spotless. The gemstone lamps on the walls were still dimly lit. Ji Tianxing stood in the middle of the hall and looked around with a complicated expression. He saw that there were many bookshelves and counters around him. They were all made of special divine gold and had not been damaged for tens of thousands of years. Various ancient books and scrolls were arranged on the bookshelves and counters. There were also many treasure boxes, jade slips, and so on. Ji Tianxing casually picked up a few ancient books and flipped through them. Everything is the same as before. The things of the past are still so familiar. Even the order of the books and techniques is still the same as before. It's a pity that things are still the same, but people have changed. Those people are no longer here. He muttered to himself and walked out of the Divine Array Pavilion. After a while, he left the third tombstone and entered the fourth tombstone. There was also a mysterious space in this tombstone. In the Sea of Clouds, there was also a sacred pagoda named the Divine Medicine Pavilion. As the name suggested, the items in the Divine Medicine Pavilion were all related to divine pills and miraculous medicines. Divine pills, medicinal herbs, medicine books, and pill formulas were all there. Ji Tianxing walked around the Divine Medicine Pavilion and checked the items left behind from the past. All kinds of materials and books for refining pills were very abundant. There were even thousands of bottles of pills in the Divine Medicine Pavilion. Unfortunately, those were all divine pills and above. Those who had not reached the martial god realm could not use them. He searched for a long time and only found a few divine pills. They were all of the best quality in the world. After leaving the Divine Medicine Pavilion, he entered the fifth and sixth tombstones. The mysterious spaces in these 2 tombstones were the Divine Talisman Pavilion and the Thousand Treasure Pavilion. The items in the Divine Talisman Pavilion were all related to the Tao of Talismans. In the Thousand Treasure Pavilion, there were all kinds of strange items, ancient and damaged treasures, and so on. Ji Tianxing stayed for a long time and saw many old items. He could not help but think of people in the past. His heart was heavy. 2 hours later, he left the Thousand Treasure Pavilion and returned to the wasteland. He stepped into the sky and crossed the wasteland as fast as a shooting star. He arrived at the deepest part of the wasteland. This was the border of the wasteland. It was blocked by a gray fog. However, there was a blank area in the fog. It had a radius of more than 100 miles. The ground of the blank area was carved with array patterns and symbols. It looked extremely mysterious. Back then, before Ji Tianxing had recovered the memories of the sword god, he had already determined that this was an ancient divine-level great array. He used his sword technique to cut open this blank area, revealing the tip of the iceberg. When he was dealing with the demon emperor and the ancestor demon god, he had imitated this array and set up the demon-slaying sword array. Now that he had recovered Kenshin's memories, he knew the whole story. He had found this ancient divine array in a galaxy when he was traveling in the depths of the starry sky. He determined that this was an ancient divine array, a treasure from 100,000 years ago. Even as a divine king, he could not understand the mysteries of the divine array. Before he could study this divine array, an accident and a great battle happened. Later on he died. But before he died he used his supreme divine ability to set up a backup plan. Not only did he leave behind Kenshin's tomb to preserve this divine array, he also tampered with the heavenly tribulation and buried his soul memories. In short, this ancient divine array was a treasure that Kenshin was unwilling to give up on even in death. Tianqing had reason to believe that the true grade of this divine array was definitely beyond the divine king level. It was worth studying for a lifetime. Heaven-cleaving sword. 7-star sword. He waved his palms again and again, slashing out huge golden swords one after another into the fog. Soon a large blank area was opened up in the fog. When the blank area reached a radius of 500 miles, it could no longer expand. Chapter 2060. Tianqing stayed in the ancient sacred array for 6 hours. In the newly opened empty area, a large number of array inscriptions appeared on the ground. He carefully studied them. He memorized the array inscriptions in his heart. He would slowly study them in the future as they would come in handy. After leaving Kenshin's tomb, his spiritual soul returned to his body. Then he began to focus on his cultivation and worked hard to break through to the martial sage realm. Before the tribulations, his strength had already reached the limit of the tribulations. After successfully passing the tribulations, he was a true half-step to martial sage. His true strength was comparable to a martial sage. Furthermore, he had received the heavenly ways reward and had been baptized by the divine power. He was only a step away from the martial sage realm. He believed that as long as he cultivated in seclusion for a few more days, he would be able to break through. 5 days passed in a flash. Tianqing consumed a large number of elixirs and spiritual stones to increase his strength as quickly as possible. 5 days later, his strength had reached the complete stage of the tribulation realm. He had reached his limit. He could clearly feel the bottleneck of the martial sage realm. As long as he broke through that bottleneck, he would become a martial sage. Therefore, he continued to cultivate in anticipation, wanting to break through in one go. 3 days later, he tried to break through the bottleneck, but he failed. Unwilling to give up, he cultivated for another 2 days and tried to break through the bottleneck again. However, he still did not succeed. He calmed down and cultivated for another 5 days to reach his peak condition. He tried to break through the bottleneck for the 3rd time, but he still failed. For half a month he had failed to break through the bottleneck 3 times. This made him rather depressed. However, he knew that he could not be impatient. He calmed down and thought of a solution. There is a huge gap between the tribulation realm and the martial sage realm. The difference between the 2 realms is like the difference between clouds and mud. Since ancient times, many elites have been stuck at this stage and could not break through. Even when I broke through to the martial sage realm, it took me 9 tries before I finally broke through in a battle of life and death. Thinking of this, Tianqing had an idea. He thought to himself, even if I am reborn and have the cultivation experience of my previous life, it is impossible for me to break through in one go. It is not easy to break through to the martial sage realm. I still need a certain opportunity. I have to accumulate my strength and seek a breakthrough in a battle. Or I can think of other ways and rely on external forces. Thus he ended his cultivation and left the secret room. He was prepared to leave the Luotian mountain and return to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. With the help of the heavenly array and the star divine furnace, he could quickly break through to the martial sage realm. However, just as he was thinking, Black Eagle came up to him and bowed respectfully. "Young master, you've finally come out of seclusion." Granny Long had come twice before, saying that she had something important to discuss. "Knowing that you are cultivating in seclusion, Granny Long left a message for you to see her after you come out." Hearing Black Hawk's words, Tianqing raised his eyebrows and thought to himself, Granny Long is probably looking for me because of the northern battlefield. He waved his hand to dismiss the Black Hawk and stepped out of the Cloud Water Palace, heading towards the palace where Granny Long lived. In a simple and elegant study, he saw Granny Long, who was busy. Granny Long sat in front of a desk, carefully reading a pile of memorials, documents, and jade slips. Her expression was focused and solemn, as if she had forgotten the passage of time. Tianqing walked to the desk, cupped his hands and bowed. "Granny Long, you were looking for me?" Granny Long was awakened by him and put down the documents in her hands. She smiled kindly at him and nodded. "Tianqing, you've already come out of seclusion?" You've successfully passed the heavenly tribulation and reached the 9th level of the crossing calamity realm. Now that you've consolidated your cultivation, you're not far from the martial sage realm, right? Ji Tianxing didn't say much and only nodded his head. Granny Long smiled and said, "With your talent, I believe that you'll be able to break through to the martial sage realm soon. At that time you'll shock the world. I congratulate you in advance." Ji Tianxing smiled and shook his head. "Granny Long, it's still early. Let's not talk about it for now. Didn't you call me here because you have something important to discuss? What is it?" Granny Long smiled and said, "I have good news for you. 20 days ago, the Divine Master had sent a divine soul doppelganger to the demon clan's base in the North Underworld Mountain. After that battle, the demons suffered great losses. The bodies of 2 great demon saints were destroyed and they lost countless elites. Now the news has spread throughout the Shenwu continent and shocked every country. On the battlefield in the north, the demons' morale has declined and their offense has declined. However, the soldiers of Scandinavia received the news and are now launching a counterattack. Tianxing, now is the best time for you to go to the battlefield in the north and participate in the war." Ji Tianxing understood what she meant and thought to himself, "Right now the most important thing for me is to break through to the martial sage realm. There are only 2 choices in front of me. I can either return to Tianzhu Mountain and borrow the power of the firmament array and the divine star furnace to break through the bottleneck. Or I can go to the battlefield in the north and fight the demons to break through." After weighing the pros and cons, he cupped his hands towards Granny Long and said solemnly, "Granny Long, don't worry. I will rush to the battlefield in the north tomorrow and participate in the war as soon as possible." Granny Long revealed a gratified smile when she saw that he had agreed and nodded. "You are the eldest disciple of Luotian Mountain and the continent's #1 genius, a half-step martial sage. Your identity is special and your strength, methods and strategies are outstanding. You will definitely shine on the battlefield. I have already made arrangements for you. Once you reach the north, you will go to the White Frost Empire's Heavenly Lion Pass and report to Lu Baishuang. You will stay by her side and serve as her deputy commander. You will command millions of soldiers." Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked doubtfully, "Lu Baishuang? Who is she?" Granny Long smiled and explained, "She is the Saint Emperor of the White Frost Empire and one of the 5 commanders of the northern battlefield. The northern battlefield is very long, spanning hundreds of millions of kilometers, and only the 5 commanders can guard it. There were more than a dozen important checkpoints along the nearly 100 million miles long defensive line. If any one of them is lost, it may lead to the fall of an empire. The Heavenly Lion Pass is one of them. It is the northern gate of the White Frost Empire and must not be lost. Lu Baishuang has 3 million soldiers under her, and they have been guarding the defensive line near the Heavenly Lion Pass. It can be said that they have fought a bloody battle and have contributed a lot. After you go, you must assist her with all your strength and do your best to defend the checkpoint and defeat the demons as soon as possible." After saying that, Granny Long took out a spatial ring and handed it to Ji Tianxing. "You don't need to pack your luggage. I have already prepared it for you. There are cultivation resources worth 30 million here. I have prepared all the elixirs, treasures, talismans and other resources. In addition, your identity token and the letter to Lu Baishuang are also in the ring." Chapter 2061. It was obvious that Granny Long had already planned for this and arranged everything. This saved Ji Tianxing a lot of trouble. After receiving the interspatial ring, he could set off immediately. After all, he was only going to the northern battlefield to kill demons and find a breakthrough in the war. As for who he would be under and who he would fight alongside, he didn't care. "Thank you for your trouble, Granny Long. Since Granny Long has made all the necessary preparations, I will go bid farewell to Yao Yao and set off shortly." Ji Tianxing bowed to Granny Long and left the study. After returning to Cloud Water Palace, he quietly entered Yun Yao's secret room and secretly observed for a while. Yun Yao was refining the Earth's Spirit Divine Pearl and her strength had clearly increased. She was too focused on her cultivation and didn't notice Ji Tianxing's arrival. Thus, Ji Tianxing left a letter on the stone table in the corner of the secret room and quietly left. When he walked out of Cloud Water Palace, the sun was rising. Qian Yu and Black Dragon stayed at Pillar of Heaven's mountains to cultivate and didn't follow him. He wanted to rush to the north so he could only fly without a mount. Little Blue Kun was in the Sword World. but its body was too bloated. If he rode it, the scene would be too comical. From Luotian Mountain to the White Frost Empire in the north, he had to cross half of the Luoshui Divine Kingdom. Even with Ji Tianqing's strength, it took him half a month to reach the vicinity of Heavenly Lion Pass. The scenery in the north was different from the bright and beautiful south. It was more of a cold and monotonous color. The sky was overcast and filled with gray clouds. There was also a thick smell of gunpowder. The earth was bleak and desolate. It was late winter. The rolling mountain range had lost its green and was dyed with a bleak yellow. Even the water level of the river at the foot of the mountain had dried up. The river surface was as calm as a mirror. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that the river surface was mostly frozen. Ji Tianqing put his hands behind his back and walked unhurriedly. He crossed 30 miles with each step and flew directly to the north. A few hundred miles in front of him, there were two particularly majestic mountains. The two mountains were not far from each other, but they were both tens of thousands of meters tall, reaching straight into the clouds. Between the two mountains was a huge gap. It was also covered by layers of clouds and mist, faintly discernible. The mountain range that connected the two mountain peaks extended to the east and west respectively, forming a giant natural wall that stretched across the mountains. If one wanted to enter the Empire of White Frost from the northern border, they would have to cross this natural wall. Ji Tianqing knew that the huge pass was the Heavenly Lion Pass, which was also the northern gate of the White Frost Empire. Ever since the establishment of the White Frost Empire, they had stationed a large number of troops near the Heavenly Lion Pass. So far it has been more than 600 years. Now 90% of the region north of the Heavenly Lion Pass had fallen, occupied by the demon race's army. The Heavenly Lion Pass had become the barrier of the White Frost Empire, the throat of fate. Once the Heavenly Lion Pass fell, the consequences would be unimaginable. Not long after, Ji Tianqing flew above the Heavenly Lion Pass. He looked down at the Heavenly Lion Pass from above and saw the situation inside and outside the pass clearly. Between the two mountain peaks was a valley with a radius of 100 miles. The terrain was vast and flat. However, rows of arrow towers were built in the valley. Densely packed spear arrays were laid out, and a powerful Saint-grade array was set up. There were also hundreds of thousands of armored and sword-wielding soldiers guarding the entrance of the valley day and night. The towering mountain peaks on both sides of the valley were very steep. Large areas of grayish-brown rocks were exposed and hung with icicles. The soldiers of the Empire of White Frost had dug densely packed caves on the cliff and built a huge fort. Every cave was lit with fire, and there were countless armored warriors walking around. Ji Tianqing scanned with his spiritual sense and estimated that there were at least 500,000 soldiers hidden in the two mountain peaks. Apart from that, the peaks of the two mountain peaks were also transformed into flat land. Many palaces and buildings were built there. Those palaces and buildings had a dignified aura and were heavily guarded. At a glance, one could tell that they were the residences of generals of various ranks. Ji Tianqing looked away and observed the situation on both sides of the Heavenly Lion Pass. On the mountain range on both sides of the pass, a military camp was built every 20 miles. More than 10,000 soldiers were stationed there. The defense extended to both ends of the mountain range, extending for a few thousand miles. When Ji Tianqing saw the situation, he nodded to himself and said, as expected of a heavily guarded place. There are really 3 million lions here. No wonder the demons couldn't take them down after so long. However, it's useless to defend blindly. We have to find an opportunity to counterattack. Only by defeating the demons and forcing them to retreat to North Underworld Mountain can we be considered victorious. At this moment, a group of lightly armored guards riding red arrow falcons came to Ji Tianqing's side at lightning speed and surrounded him. Who are you? Why did you barge into the Heavenly Lion Pass? Tell me your name. There were a total of 9 arrow falcon knights. All of them had the strength of the primordial spirit realm. They were the most elite scouts. As for the vermilion arrow falcon, it was a kind of demon bird with an extremely fast speed. It was most suitable for short-distance raids and scouting. Ji Tianqing glanced at them and said expressionlessly, "Go and report to your general that a disciple of Luotian Mountain has come here for an important mission." Before leaving, Granny Long had said that the matter of him joining Lu Baishuang's side and participating in the war was currently a secret. Only a few people knew about it, including Granny Long, him, Lu Baishuang, and the vice-general. It was not appropriate to reveal it too early. If he directly said his name and said that he wanted to meet Saint Emperor Lu Baishuang, these Arrow Falcon Knights would definitely not believe him and might even fight. Therefore he only vaguely stated his identity and purpose. Even so, the 9 Arrow Falcon Knights were filled with respect and looked at him with much more respect. Since this young master is a disciple of Luotian Mountain, you are naturally an honored guest. However, can you show your identity token? Ji Tianxing did not say much. He took out his identity token from his spatial ring and threw it to the Arrow Falcon Knight. After that person checked and confirmed his identity, he personally led him to the mountain peak. Young master, please follow me. The Arrow Falcon Knight led him to the mountain peak on the east side and landed in front of a palace. The person entered the palace and quickly reported the situation. Soon, a middle-aged man in armor and dressed like a general came to welcome Ji Tianxing and negotiate with him. This general's surname was Qin. He was the commander of 30,000 scouts. His position was second only to the commander and the 10 great generals. Ji Tianxing did not want to waste time. He stated his identity and purpose to General Qin, saying that he wanted to meet Saint Emperor Lu Baishuang. General Qin did not know this and was naturally shocked. He stared at Ji Tianxing in disbelief for a long time. In the end, he saw Ji Tianxing's dignified appearance and unfathomable strength. He made up his mind and cupped his hands, saying, "Young Master Ji, Lord Saint Emperor is busy with official business and has a noble status. Even if it is me, I cannot meet Her Majesty without being summoned. I can only report this to Deputy Commander Lord Yu and ask him to make a decision." Chapter 2062. The Holy Emperor of the White Frost Empire Lu Baishuang was one of the 5 commanders. Not only did she have to manage the empire's affairs, but she also had to lead millions of soldiers and deal with complicated military affairs. Even if one was a martial saint, they would not be able to do everything by themselves, much less do everything by themselves. Therefore she had 2 deputy commanders under her to help her manage the millions of soldiers and guard the Sky Lion Pass. The left deputy commander Yu Fu was the ancestor of the number 1 sect in the White Frost Empire. He had cultivated for more than 1,800 years. He was not only the ancestor of the Tianyue sect, but also the martial arts leader of the White Frost Empire. He had supreme prestige in the martial arts world. All the martial arts sects and forces in the White Frost Empire followed his lead and respected him very much. The right deputy commander under Lu Baishuang was originally the commander of the empire's army. This person was a martial saint expert who was good at fighting and was regarded highly by Lu Baishuang. But because of this, half a year ago the right deputy commander led a large number of elite experts to stop the demon army and destroy the demon army's conspiracy. Although the mission was a success, the right deputy commander successfully disrupted the demon army's sneak attack plan. But he was also heavily surrounded and killed by the commander of the demon army. The commander of the demon army was one of the 4 demon saints, second demon saint Songyu. After the right deputy commander died, the army's morale fell. Lu Baishuang was also depressed for a few days. The position of the right deputy commander had been empty and no one could replace it. Granny Long had arranged for Ji Tianxing to come to the Sky Lion Pass to take over the right deputy commander's position. In half a year, the heavy responsibility of commanding the 3 million soldiers and guarding the Sky Lion Pass fell on the left deputy commander Yu Fu. Yu Fu strongly advocated guarding the Sky Lion Pass and not going out to fight. The official explanation was that because the right deputy commander had died, the morale was low and it was not suitable to fight outside the pass. Otherwise they would be defeated. But there were rumors in the army that Yu Fu was afraid of death and did not want to repeat the mistake of the right deputy commander. At the same time, Yu Fu had great power. Besides Lu Baishuang, no one could control him. In this half a year he had used his power to gain benefits for the Tianyue sect and secretly accumulated a large number of cultivation resources. As long as Lu Baishuang was not here, the Sky Lion Pass was almost his alone. At this moment, in a magnificent palace at the peak of the mountain. In the spacious but dark secret chamber, the floor and walls were paved with top-grade spiritual jade, and the air was filled with colorful spiritual energy. Generally speaking, martial artists' private chambers were used for closed-door cultivation. In order not to affect the mind, the furnishings were very simple. However, this secret room was different. It was decorated magnificently and countless cultivation resources and gems were piled up. In the corner of the secret chamber, there was also a steaming hot bath filled with colorful spirit liquid. A thin, white-haired old man who was 7 feet tall was lying in the pool with his arms and legs spread out. His eyes were closed as he enjoyed the nourishment of the spirit liquid. He was not wearing any clothes, only a piece of white silk cloth to cover his important parts. 2 maidservants who were as delicate as jade and tender as water were squatting on either side of him, helping him relax his muscles. Even though the 2 beautiful women maintained their smiles the entire time, their faces were filled with charm as they served the white-haired old man wholeheartedly. However, their eyes inadvertently revealed a look of fear and dread. This was because the white-haired old man they were serving was the martial arts master of the Empire of White Frost, the deputy commander of millions of troops, Yu Fu. At this moment, the voice of his trusted guard came from outside the secret chamber. "Commander Yu, General Qin of the scout camp requests to see you. He says that he has something important to report." Hearing the voice, Yu Fu slowly opened his eyes and raised his snow-white eyebrows. "Come in and report," he said expressionlessly. Then the door of the secret room opened a crack, and a guard in black with a cloak bowed and entered the secret room. This person was Yu Fu's trusted guard. He guarded the door of the secret chamber and passed on the message for him. As for General Qin, he could only wait outside the secret chamber. He was not qualified to enter. The black-clothed guard lowered his head and came to the side of the bath. With a respectful and cautious look he reported, "Commander Yu, a young man who calls himself Ji Tianxing found General Qin." After explaining the matter in detail, he did not say anything and waited quietly. Even if the 2 beautiful women were only wearing a thin silk dress, the beautiful scenery was faintly discernible. He did not dare to glance at them. When Yu Fu heard the news, he could not help but frown and sneer. "I didn't expect that kid to come so quickly." So what if he's a disciple of Luotian Mountain? He just made a contribution at the western border and took back a few mines. He's so young and weak, but he wants to use the name of a disciple of Luotian Mountain to become a deputy commander? With his little ability, can he command millions of troops? I'm afraid he'll wet his pants the moment he gets on the battlefield. As the deputy commander, Yu Fu naturally knew that Ji Tianxing was going to be the deputy commander of the right side. However, he was disdainful and dissatisfied. After the black-clothed guard heard this, he asked carefully, "Commander Yu, shall I report to General Qin and ask him to chase that person away?" Yu Fu nodded. He kneaded the legs of the girl beside him and sneered, "What kind of cat or dog dares to come to Heavenly Lion Pass and ask to see the Saint Emperor? If everyone imitates him, won't it be a mess? Let's give him a show of strength first and kill his spirit." Although he's the deputy commander appointed by Luotian Mountain and none of us can disobey him. However, Ben Shuai wants to let him know who's the real commander with authority. He's just a kid, so he just needs to wear the title of deputy commander and stay here obediently. This subordinate understands. The black-clothed guard quickly nodded. After thinking for a while, he asked, "Commander Yu, that kid is very young and he's a disciple of Luotian Mountain. He must be proud and arrogant. What if he can't bear the humiliation and gets into a dispute with General Qin?" "Ha ha." Yu Fu immediately laughed and said with a face full of contempt, "That's good. He's just a kid in the tribulation realm and General Qin wants to chase him down the mountain. When the Saint Emperor and Luotian Mountain ask for the reason, won't Ben Shuai be able to make up stories? An impetuous, arrogant and domineering young disciple wants to be the deputy commander of an army of 1,000,000? It's simply the biggest joke in the world. Whether it's the Saint Emperor or Luotian Mountain, they will be extremely disappointed in him." The black-clothed guard quickly cupped his hands and said sincerely, "Commander Yu is really brilliant. This subordinate admires you to the extreme." After saying that, he bowed and left the secret room. Ji Tianxing sat in the main hall of the scout camp and closed his eyes to rest. There was a cup of tea on the table in front of him, but he didn't touch it. There were 2 soldiers guarding the door, but he didn't look at them. After waiting for a full 15 minutes, General Qin returned with a gloomy expression. Moreover, there were 6 black-clothed guards behind him. They were all elites in the primordial spirit realm. Tap tap tap. He sat boldly on the chair and stared at General Qin with a playful look. He sneered, "If this is all you've done, then it's too disappointing. Not to mention the 8 commanders you placed outside the palace. Even if General Qin were to personally attack, he wouldn't be able to defeat a single finger of mine. General Qin, don't waste your energy. Go and get Deputy Commander Yu to come here personally." General Qin originally thought that Ji Tianxing was just a little arrogant and would not dare to be impudent in the Heavenly Lion Pass. After all, this was the territory of the White Frost Empire. When Ji Tianxing first came here, he could only choose to endure silently. He would not dare to act arrogantly. Otherwise, if he caused a bad influence here, how would he be able to convince the people in the future? But he never thought that Ji Tianxing would be so arrogant. For a moment, General Qin was so angry that his face turned purple. His hand that was pointing at Ji Tianxing was trembling. You have such a big tone. You are so arrogant that you are out of control. Brat, don't think that just because you are a disciple of the Luotian Mountain, you can be unrestrained. This is the Heavenly Lion Pass, Deputy Commander Yu's territory. You are openly causing trouble here. This general will not let you off easily. General Qin was so angry that he let it slip. But he immediately covered it up. He waved his hand and ordered the 8 commanders to pounce on Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing heard it clearly. Originally, he was wondering whether it was Deputy Commander Yu who was targeting him or Lu Baishuang who instructed him to put on a show of strength. Now that he heard General Qin's tone, he could immediately determine that it was most likely Deputy Commander Yu's doing. Since that was the case, he was even more confident. He was determined to make a big deal out of this. Trying to put on a show of strength? Trying to make him bow and submit to humiliation? Such a person had not been born yet. Seeing the 8 Tribulation Realm commanders pouncing on him, Ji Tianxing was still sitting on the pear-wood chair calmly. A bunch of useless people. His cold gaze swept across the crowd. A layer of dazzling white light burst out from his body. Buzz. The white light bloomed and enveloped the 8 Tribulation Realm commanders. Instantly, the commanders who were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws were all shaken until they vomited blood and were sent flying backward. Plop, plop. Everyone fell on their backs in the main hall, making a series of dull thuds. The white light spread out and shook the entire main hall. Dozens of cracks appeared on the ground. The tables, chairs, and screens on the ground were all smashed into powder and scattered on the ground. The previously spacious and tidy hall immediately turned into a mess. Ji Tianxing deliberately controlled his strength. If he did not control it, the entire palace would have been turned into ruins. Everyone was lying on the ground, crying out in pain. They were in a miserable state. Only Ji Tianxing was still sitting on the pear-wood chair. The chair under him was not damaged at all. General Qin stood in the main hall and glared at Ji Tianxing. His face turned green and white. He was shocked and angry. How dare you? You openly attacked the soldiers of Heavenly Lion Pass. You are rebelling. You are finished. No one can save you. Even Luotian Mountain will not condone you and cover up for you to commit such a heinous crime. You want to be the deputy commander of Heavenly Lion Pass with your tyrannical and cruel behavior? Dream on. Although his subordinates, guards, and commanders were injured, General Qin seemed to be very angry. But he was secretly laughing in his heart. He was very happy. Because he had completed the task given by Yu Fu. He had confirmed Ji Tianxing's crime. What was done could not be undone. Ji Tianxing could not clear his name no matter what. Boy, how can you fight with Commander Yu? General Qin looked at Ji Tianxing with a cold smile and mocked him disdainfully when he thought of the good news. Ji Tianxing was not angry. He smiled and said, "Of course I will not be merciful to idiots like you who are seeking death. Didn't Yu Fu want to confirm my crime? What are these useless soldiers and crab generals? Let him come here personally and be beaten up by me. Isn't that more to his liking?" General Qin frowned. Cold light shot out from his eyes. He sneered and said, "Boy, you are too arrogant. Are you worthy of Commander Yu to take action? Just you wait. I will gather all the generals and beat you down from Heavenly Lion Pass." After saying that, General Qin quickly left the main hall. He summoned 2 guards and asked them to pass the message. One of the guards rushed to Yu Fu's palace to pass the message. Chapter 2064. Not long later, the news of Ji Tianxing wreaking havoc in the scout camps spread across the mountain peak. When the generals of the various camps heard about this, they were all filled with righteous indignation and were eager to fight. Those who could become generals and lead a camp of over 10,000 soldiers were all experts in the tribulation realm. These people relied on their military exploits to climb out from mountains of corpses and seas of blood. They were all elite experts who had experienced hundreds of battles. They were iron-blooded, valiant, and considered themselves to be unparalleled in their loyalty and bravery. They looked down on the disciples of the aristocratic families and sects the most. In their eyes, those were all delicate and weak flowers that grew in a greenhouse. They only had strength and cultivation, but they didn't have the ability to kill the enemy. They were all good for nothing and were useless. Therefore, when they heard that the eldest disciple of the Luotian mountain, Ji Tianxing, had come to the scout camp and was wreaking havoc, they rushed over to the scout camp. All the generals rushed over wanting to teach that lawless guy a lesson. However, when the dozens of generals arrived at the scout camp's main hall, they were all dumbfounded. They saw that the scout camp's main hall was still intact. However, the main hall was in a mess and there were many bloodstains on the ground. Dozens of commanders and generals who were either severely injured or unconscious were lying on the ground in a disorderly manner, looking particularly miserable. Only Ji Tianxing was still sitting at the main seat in the main hall. He was calmly holding a cup of spiritual tea and sipping it leisurely. There were no injuries on his body. His robe was as white as snow and his long hair was neat and tidy. No one would dare to believe that he had just fought with a large number of people and even injured dozens of experts. Seeing this scene, more than 30 generals looked at General Qin, who was sitting at the entrance of the main hall. General Qin's armor was tattered and his hair was disheveled like a chicken's nest. His face was bruised and swollen and his face was covered in blood. He looked miserable and comical. Seeing him like this, a few generals couldn't help but laugh. "General Qin, what happened to you? You also fought with that fellow? You were beaten to this state? Too hateful. That fellow is too arrogant. We must not let him off." General Qin couldn't help but tell the truth after being questioned by everyone. Ji Tianxing, he is too much. He let out an arrogant statement that he wanted to fight his way through the entire Heavenly Lion Pass. If anyone refused to submit, he would beat them until they submitted. Even Marshal Yu was the same. The soldiers were furious and wanted to join forces to capture him, but they were all severely injured by him. When I saw that everyone had fainted, I wanted to send everyone out so that they could recover as soon as possible so that their martial arts foundations would not be affected. I didn't expect that Ji Tianxing would beat me up without saying anything. General Qin's face was swollen like a pig's head, and his lips were like sausages. The way he spoke was especially comical. In particular, he was too angry, too agitated, and the way his face was distorted was even more ridiculous. The generals were both angry and amused, which made General Qin even more ashamed and furious. However, there were a few steady and experienced generals who shouted righteously, "Generals, this matter concerns the reputation of the entire Heavenly Lion Pass. We absolutely cannot back down. This brat is the eldest disciple of the Luotian mountain. We naturally wouldn't dare to kill him. We still need to capture him and hand him over to the Luotian mountain for them to deal with. However, we must give him a good beating as long as we don't kill him. That's right. This brat is arrogant and lawless. We must beat him half to death so that he can live with his tail between his legs in the future. What are you all waiting for? Let's go together and capture him and hand him over to Marshal Yu for punishment." A few prestigious generals spoke. They took the lead and stepped into the main hall, charging towards Ji Tianxing. The other 30 generals followed suit and used their unique skills and secret techniques, vowing to capture Ji Tianxing on the spot. Ji Tianxing, who was sitting on the main seat, raised his eyelids and glanced at the crowd. He waved his hand as if he was shooing away flies. Swish, 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 swish. A dazzling golden light burst out and turned into 30 fist shadows, ruthlessly blasting towards the generals. Although the main hall was 100 meters wide, it was still too narrow. The generals huddled together. When they saw the sky full of fist shadows, it was too late for them to dodge. Bang, bang, bang. A series of dull sounds burst out, like muffled thunder on a dry day, reverberating in the sky above the mountain peak. More than 30 generals in the Crossing Calamity realm spat out blood from their mouths. They flew back in a sorry state and fell into the main hall. Violent shockwaves spread out in all directions. The huge palace was instantly shattered into pieces, turning into countless rubble that collapsed onto the ground. Hundreds of generals and soldiers in the main hall were immediately buried in the ruins. Fortunately, everyone was quite powerful. Even if they were smashed by the brick ruins, they only suffered some superficial injuries, which made them look even more miserable. No one was smashed to death by the brick ruins. That would be too ridiculous. Only Ji Tianxing was unscathed. There was not even a speck of dust on his body. He was still sitting on the big chair made of pear wood, holding a cup of spiritual tea in his hand, floating above the ruins. The 30 generals were covered in dust and dirt. They climbed out of the ruins in a sorry state and pointed at him, cursing. "Bastard, how dare you humiliate us like this? Lad, the Heavenly Lion Pass will not let you off. No matter how powerful you are or how noble your status is, you should not humiliate us like this. We are all meritorious officials. Lad, don't be so smug. When Commander Yu comes here personally, you will pay back 10 times. Yes. Everyone go and ask Commander Yu to come here. We must skin this lad alive." Everyone was ashamed and resentful. They hated Ji Tianxing very much. However, after witnessing Ji Tianxing's terrifying strength, they did not dare to do anything rash. Ji Tianxing could not be bothered with them. He let them make a racket and pretended that he did not hear anything. He continued to drink his tea. Such a shocking commotion would definitely alarm the 2 mountains and spread throughout the entire Heavenly Lion Pass. This was exactly what he wanted. It would be best if all the generals and soldiers in the Heavenly Lion Pass could see it. Deputy Commander Yu wanted to put him in his place and force him to swallow his anger and give in. He could also use this opportunity to turn the Heavenly Lion Pass upside down and establish his dominance. Only powerful and invincible martial strength could intimidate the heroes and force them to bow down. No matter what kind of conspiracy, he would not bother to resolve it. He had his own supreme skills and methods to break it with force. Conspiracies and tricks were unorthodox. Only supreme martial strength was the way to go. As expected, the main hall of the scout camp collapsed. The curses of dozens of generals immediately alarmed the 2 mountains. In just 15 minutes, the news had spread throughout the entire Heavenly Lion Pass. During this time, dozens of tribulation passing stage powerhouses rushed to the mountain peak and joined forces to attack Ji Tianxing. However, these people suffered the same fate as the previous generals. They were all severely injured by Ji Tianxing. They vomited blood and lay on the ground with dispirited looks on their faces. Those who were not strong enough were knocked out on the spot and lay on the ruins in a sorry state. For a moment, the entire Heavenly Lion Pass was in an uproar. When the hundreds of thousands of soldiers heard about this, they were filled with righteous indignation. They could not wait to tear Ji Tianxing into pieces. Only the mountain peak on the west side of the pass was peaceful. Chapter 2065. Before coming to Sky Lion Pass, Ji Tianxing had already understood the situation. The right deputy commander had died in battle, and the left deputy commander had taken over the power and was unwilling to send out troops. Ji Tianxing knew all of this. The mountain peak to the east where he was at was where the left deputy commander Yu Fu was stationed. The generals stationed on this mountain peak were all Yu Fu's trusted subordinates. The generals on the west mountain peak were all former subordinates of the right deputy commander. Although many of the generals had been bought over by Yu Fu in the past half a year. However, there were still many generals who were unwilling to submit to Yu Fu and become his lackeys. These people were either loyal to the right deputy commander, loyal to Holy Emperor Baishuang, or neutral. Now Ji Tianxing saw that the west mountain peak was peaceful, and many generals were secretly watching. They had no intention of getting involved in this matter, and he could not help but nod his head secretly. The truth was just as he had expected, and the situation was becoming clearer. Now that things have gotten out of hand, it is impossible to cover it up. Yu Fu has achieved his goal and it is time for him to appear. As for the generals stationed on the west mountain peak, they will most likely report this matter to Lu Baishuang and let her deal with it personally to prevent Yu Fu from acting arbitrarily. When Lu Baishuang appears personally, this matter should be over. Ji Tianxing silently calculated in his heart and took another sip of tea. He sat in the sky, drinking tea amidst the clouds. Below him was a pile of ruins, and more than 100 generals were lying haphazardly on the ground, and more than 30 people were cursing. The two completely different scenes created a strong contrast, and it was unforgettable. Ji Tianxing had left an extremely deep impression on the soldiers who were hiding in the surroundings and secretly watching the battle. At this moment, in the palace deep in the mountain peak, a dazzling golden light shone. Swoosh! The golden light streaked across the sky and headed straight for the scout camp. In the blink of an eye, the golden light flew above the scout camp and stopped 100 meters in front of Ji Tianxing. The golden light dissipated and 9 figures appeared. The person in the lead was a white-haired old man wearing golden armor and a purple jade-gilded green feather helmet. This person's body was thin and his appearance was unremarkable. However, his eyes were like pitch-black abysses, causing people to feel apprehensive when looking at them. Ji Tianxing did not need to guess to know that this white-haired old man was the left deputy commander Yu Fu. Of the 8 people behind Yu Fu, there were 4 black-clothed guards and 4 silver-armored generals. The strength of these 8 experts had all reached the 5th level of the Tribulation Passing Realm and were all martial lords. They were originally not generals in the army, but Yu Fu's disciples and experts from various sections. They were recruited by him to work for him. The generals on the ruins were screaming in pain or cursing Ji Tianxing with righteous indignation. Suddenly seeing Yu Fu arrive, everyone's spirits were lifted, revealing a look of joy as they cheered. Great! Marshal Yu is here. Marshal Yu was indeed alarmed. That brat is dead for sure. General Yu has always been strict with his troops. Let's see how that brat can still be arrogant. Weren't you very arrogant just now? Didn't you boast that you would conquer the entire Heavenly Lion Pass? Let's see how you can still be arrogant now. Everyone just wait for the good show. Marshal Yu will definitely cripple that brat and make him kowtow to apologize. At that time, that brat's face will be swept to the ground. Let's see if he still has the face to return to Luotian Mountain. Everyone is excitedly discussing. Their words are filled with anticipation. Only by seeing Ji Tianxing being oppressed can the hatred in their hearts be dispelled. Yu Fu's face is gloomy, his brows are filled with anger. He stared at Ji Tianxing with a sharp gaze and shouted, "Brat! I don't care who you are, what's your origin and background? Today you have behaved atrociously in Heavenly Lion Pass, injured more than 100 soldiers and destroyed the scout camp. These are all crimes worthy of death." His deep and vigorous voice, containing unquestionable majesty, resounded through the sky. Everyone on the mountain peak, including the tens of thousands of spectating soldiers, held their breaths and stared at the scene without blinking. Ji Tianxing looked at Yu Fu with a cold smile and said in a playful tone, "Deputy Marshal Yu, you really have good methods. The moment you appear you put such a big label on me, but you didn't ask about my identity and purpose. You are so eager to convict me, aren't you a little too deliberate?" At this point he pretended to be suddenly enlightened and said, "Oh, I almost forgot. I asked General Qin to inform you before, so of course you know my identity and purpose. So you sent so many useless people to capture me. You are just deliberately humiliating me and framing me. Since that's the case, I don't mind introducing my identity and purpose in front of everyone." Ji Tianxing said these words in one breath without pausing, not giving Yu Fu a chance to interrupt. After he finished speaking, he took out a dark golden token and a luxurious letter from his spatial ring. He showed the token and letter to the surrounding people and announced in a solemn tone, "This seat is Ji Tianxing, the chief disciple of Luotian Mountain. I have come to Sky Lion Pass to participate in the battle and take up the position of Right Deputy Marshal under the orders of the Divine Master. It's a pity that a certain Deputy Marshal looked down on me and dared to disobey the Divine Master's orders and sent his subordinates to besiege this seat. Yu Fu, you actually dared to harm your comrades and murder the new Right Deputy Marshal so that you can monopolize the power? This seat needs an explanation from you." Hearing Ji Tianxing's words, the expressions of the tens of thousands of soldiers in all directions instantly changed. Countless people revealed looks of realization and started to discuss secretly. Heavens! This fellow was actually sent by Luotian Mountain to participate in the battle and take up the position of Right Deputy Marshal? How can this be? We didn't know anything about this beforehand. Can't be fake, right? He is so young and not a martial saint, How can he be a deputy marshal? It can't be fake. If he faked the divine master's orders, that would be a heinous crime. It's over. Marshal, you did not investigate clearly before sending everyone to attack. This won't end well. The many soldiers understood what Ji Tianxing meant. They guessed that Yu Fu deliberately sent people to humiliate him. Only now did everyone understand why Ji Tianxing wanted to cause trouble in the scout camp. It turned out that there was a reason for this. However, these soldiers were all Yu Fu's subordinates. Even if they understood, they did not dare to say it out loud. At the same time, Yu Fu's expression turned even gloomier. The cold light in his eyes turned sharper. Originally, he had been soaking in the hot spring in a secret room. When he heard his trusted guards reporting the news, he felt even more pleased with himself. The more trouble Ji Tianxing caused, the happier he was. This would prove that Ji Tianxing was guilty. At the same time, this would prove that Ji Tianxing was too impetuous and would not be able to accomplish much. He would not be a threat to Yu Fu. When the matter blew up and startled the entire Heavenly Lion Pass, Yu Fu calmly rushed over to deal with it. However, Yu Fu did not expect that Ji Tianxing was not stupid at all. It seemed like he had already planned this. They had just met, but Ji Tianxing took out a bunch of things in quick succession. He even took out his identity medallion and letters. Chapter 2066. Yu Fu had no choice but to re-evaluate Ji Tianxing. I thought he was a naive and arrogant hothead without any shrewdness. I didn't expect him to be prepared. Ben Shuai will have to use more methods. Yu Fu thought to himself as he looked at Ji Tianxing with an even colder gaze. Ji Tianxing, you keep saying that you came to Sky Lion Pass under the orders of the Divine Master. But Ben Shuai knows that Granny Long of Luotian Mountain sent you here. Your actions are equivalent to forging an oracle and blaspheming the Divine Master. This is an unforgivable crime and your death is not to be regretted. Ji Tianxing glanced at him and said calmly, Deputy Commander Yu, don't forget that Luotian Mountain is the Divine Master's training ground. Granny Long guards Luotian Mountain and is the spokesperson of the Divine Master. Her decrees are not only approved by the Divine Master, they are also the orders of the Divine Master. Yu Fu frowned and stared at him with a sharp gaze. You are obviously twisting words and forcing logic. Ji Tianxing sneered, you are ignorant and inexperienced. You are deliberately framing me. Yu Fu was even angrier as he shouted, even if you came to Sky Lion Pass under the orders of the Deputy Commander. But before you took up the position, you clashed with your subordinates, destroyed the scout camp and injured so many generals. Your nature is so violent and your methods are so cruel. What qualifications do you have to lead the army? All the soldiers are seriously injured and will need at least 1 to 2 years to recover. During this time, the defense of Sky Lion Pass is weak and it is very likely to be broken through. At that time, the demon race army will invade and the entire empire of White Frost will suffer a disaster. The consequences will be unimaginable. Ji Tianxing, what are your intentions? If you did not look like a human, Ben Shuai would even suspect that you are a spy of the demon race. These imposing words spread throughout the entire mountain peak, causing countless soldiers to be filled with righteous indignation. Everyone agreed with Yu Fu's words and looked at Ji Tianxing with eyes full of hatred and enmity. Even many of Yu Fu's trusted generals raised their arms and shouted. Ji Tianxing has ulterior motives. He tried to destroy the defenses of the Heavenly Lion Pass. He has committed a heinous crime. How could he be so cruel to his own kind? This person is inhumane. In front of everyone's eyes, the heavens are clear. We will definitely not accept this person guarding the Heavenly Lion Pass. Marshal Yu, please punish Ji Tianxing severely and give us justice. More than a dozen generals shouted first and soon dozens of people echoed, looking like a group of excited people. When Yu Fu saw that it was about time, he glared at Ji Tianxing and released an invisible pressure that enveloped him. Ji Tianxing, what else do you have to say? The powerful pressure of a martial saint ruthlessly suppressed Ji Tianxing. If it was an ordinary person, they would definitely be terrified. They would be suppressed to the point of bending their backs and lowering their heads or even lying on the ground. It looked as if he had bowed his head and admitted his guilt. It was hard for him to refute. However, Yu Fu did not expect that Ji Tianxing would not move at all. He did not react to his pressure at all. How is this possible? This brat can actually ignore my pressure? Yu Fu was shocked. However, he could not tell Ji Tianxing's cultivation level. He could not help but frown. At this moment Ji Tianxing laughed loudly and said, "Deputy Marshal Yu, you are really good at distorting right and wrong. If you had not purposely made things difficult for me and ordered those generals to attack me, why would I have made a move? If not for your orders, would those generals have dared to attack me? Now I am the one who harmed my own kind. You are even slandering me as a spy of the demon race. I think that a vermin and trash like you is the greatest hidden danger of the Heavenly Lion Pass. You are an eternal sinner of the White Frost Empire." Yu Fu's words were sharp, but Ji Tianxing did not show any mercy. His words were even harsher and more vicious. Vermin, trash, eternal sinner, and other such terms angered Yu Fu to the point that his face turned ashen and his body trembled. Yu Fu roared and pointed at Ji Tianxing with a ferocious expression. He shouted coldly, "You are such an audacious madman. You really don't know what is good for you. You are arrogant to the extreme. Ben Shuai is the hero who guarded the Heavenly Lion Pass, but you slandered him like this. In front of everyone, Ben Shuai will not talk nonsense with you anymore. Draw your sword. Ben Shuai wants to see how capable you are. Who is the real trash?" The time was ripe. Yu Fu's anger had reached its peak and turned into killing intent. His whole body emitted a dark red murderous aura. He rushed into the sky like a rainbow and locked onto Ji Tianxing's aura with his divine sense. He could unleash a thunderous attack at any time and kill Ji Tianxing on the spot. Ji Tianxing was not afraid. He sneered and said, "You are not worthy for me to draw my sword. You are courting death." Yu Fu was so angry that he could no longer suppress his killing intent. He waved his palms and attacked Ji Tianxing. Mountain-splitting palm. Yu Fu's palms struck out two golden palm shadows. It was as if they were splitting the sky and earth. They slashed toward Ji Tianxing. The dark night sky was immediately illuminated by the golden light. The white clouds and thick fog in the night sky were also dispersed by the formless energy. All the soldiers on the mountain peak looked up at the night sky with excited and expectant expressions. In everyone's eyes, Deputy Commander Yu had personally made a move. This time Ji Tianxing was dead meat. However, Ji Tianxing was still very calm. He calmly raised his palms and attacked Yu Fu. He did not dodge at all. He chose to face Yu Fu head-on. Star-shattering fist. Two silver fist shadows struck out and collided with the giant golden palm shadows. There was an earth-shattering explosion. Kaboom! Amidst a deafening explosion, the mountain-splitting palm shattered with a bang, turning into golden light that scattered everywhere. The silver fist shadow's power did not diminish and hit Yu Fu instantly. Bang! In the explosion, Yu Fu's body trembled and he was pushed back 100 feet before he stopped. Although he had the sacred armor to protect his body, he was not injured by Ji Tianxing. However, in front of everyone's eyes, he had been pushed back by Ji Tianxing. He could not even take one blow from Ji Tianxing. This was too humiliating and it was out of everyone's expectations. Yu Fu was so angry that his face turned white. His heart was filled with shame and anger. The soldiers who were watching the battle at the top of the mountain were also dumbfounded. Their faces were filled with horror as they widened their eyes and exclaimed in surprise. "Oh my God! Am I seeing things? Deputy Commander Yu was pushed back by that kid? How is that possible? Has that kid reached the martial sage realm? This is too unbelievable. Deputy Commander Yu is an ancestor martial sage. How old is that kid? He is so young. If he has really broken through to the martial sage realm, it would definitely shock the world. Why is there no news at all? No wonder he dares to be so arrogant. He even dares to insult Deputy Commander Yu. Turns out that he is really capable." Many soldiers were discussing among themselves. Their voices were like a flood that exploded and reverberated around the mountain peak. Yu Fu heard it clearly and he felt even more humiliated. He waved his palm again and used his secret skill to attack Ji Tianxing. Shadowless Diffraction Sword. Chapter 2067. The giant sword pierced through the air as fast as a flash of light. Before the sword arrived, the formless sword intent had already enveloped a radius of 100 miles, ruthlessly suppressing Ji Tianxing. The razor-sharp sword chi sliced the night sky apart, leaving cracks in its wake. This sword was terrifyingly powerful and had a shocking momentum. The sword was so fast that even a shadow could not be formed. It was as if it could cut the moonlight in half. This was how the shadowless diffraction sword got its name. The soldiers on the mountain peak were dazzled when they saw Yu Fu use his ultimate sword technique. They were full of admiration and worship. However, Ji Tianqing was disdainful and scoffed. You dare to show off such a clumsy sword technique before an expert? I'll let you see what the true way of the sword is. As he spoke, Ji Tianqing put his left hand behind his back and pointed at Yu Fu with his right hand. Shattering Sun Sword. A 300-meter-long, dazzling golden sword slashed at the shadowless fractional light sword. The two giant swords were both dazzling gold, but there was a huge difference in size and aura. Compared to the dazzling shattering sun sword, the shadowless diffraction sword seemed especially weak. Kaboom! Amidst the deafening sound, the two giant swords collided and exploded with a golden light that covered the sky. It was as dazzling as the sun. The 1,000-foot-long shadowless diffraction sword was shattered on the spot. The 1,000-foot-long shattering sun sword was not damaged at all. It was still divine and dazzling. Bang! The shattering sun sword's power did not decrease. It hit Yu Fu with a loud bang. Yu Fu was sent flying backward on the spot. He rolled and fell into the distant night sky. Fortunately, he was wearing a divine armor and Ji Tianqing did not use the sword of burial of heaven, so he was not seriously injured. Even so, his robe was torn and tattered and there was a dent on his armor. His helmet was also crooked, revealing his messy hair. He looked a little pathetic. Yu Fu flew backward for a full 10 miles before he dissipated the force of the impact and stopped in the night sky. His face was as pale as paper. His chest rose and fell rapidly. He panted for a while before he could circulate his magic power smoothly. Dense shock and rage filled his heart and mind, causing him to be unable to restrain his rage, shame, and indignation. How is this possible? His attainment in the way of the sword is stronger than Ben Shuai's? Ben Shuai is an ancestor-level martial sage, but he is so young. How can there be such a monster in the world? Yu Fu lowered his head and looked at the dent on his chest armor. His eyes widened in disbelief as he muttered hoarsely. All along he had great power and influence and he could be said to be in high spirits. Until tonight he'd suffered repeated setbacks and he'd been repeatedly humiliated by a young junior, causing him to be battered to the point he was covered in wounds. And he could not accept this fact. His cheeks were red and hot, the blood in his body was burning, and the flames of anger were surging in his chest. His fists were clenched tightly and his 10 fingers were cracking. However, when he saw the situation clearly, his face became even uglier. The soldiers on the mountain peak all stared at Ji Tianqing in the night sky with their mouths agape. Their eyes were filled with shock and admiration. Many people let out exclamations of surprise as they discussed excitedly. Unbelievable! This person's strength is so terrifying. Martial Yu is an experienced martial sage. He can't even block one of his moves. After exchanging 2 blows in a row, he was still no match for Ji Tianqing and was even sent flying dozens of miles away. Is this still our Martial Yu? How can there be such a monster in the world? You can imagine how high this person's prestige is in Luotian Mountain. It's over. Martial Yu has a grudge with this person. This person is so monstrous. He must be highly regarded by the Divine Master. Martial Yu's situation is worrying. Yu Fu was angry and ashamed. When he heard the discussion of the soldiers, he was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. The soldiers were shocked when they saw this scene. But Martial Yu is injured. Martial Yu was seriously injured by Ji Tianqing to the point of vomiting blood. Martial Yu lost so miserably. I'm afraid he won't be able to raise his head in front of Ji Tianqing in the future. Countless soldiers were discussing and worried about Yu Fu's situation. How can Ji Tianqing let go of this opportunity to ridicule Yu Fu? Vice Marshal Yu, who is the trash? The result is clear. You are an old man who takes advantage of your seniority. You don't have any real ability but only know how to play tricks. How can you lead millions of soldiers to victory? Ji Tianqing's voice spread through the night sky and the soldiers on the 2 mountain peaks heard it clearly. On the eastern mountain peak, the soldiers under Yu Fu are filled with anger and humiliation, but they are powerless to refute. On the western mountain peak, the soldiers on the western mountain peak find it funny and are excitedly watching a good show. Yu Fu has lost all his face. He is so angry that he can no longer maintain his rationality. His eyes are covered with a layer of red. Light flashed in his palm and a dazzling golden sword appeared. This old man has no enmity with you, but you humiliate this old man like this. This old man will not rest until you die. As he spoke, Yu Fu's body bloomed with scarlet flames and his aura climbed to the peak. He doesn't care about anything else. He just wants to use all his strength to kill Ji Tianxing with his sword to vent the hatred in his heart and regain his face. Ji Tianxing looked at him with a smile and said in a contemptuous tone, "This seat said just now, don't use sword skills in front of this seat. That is asking to be humiliated. Ji Tianxing, I will kill you." Yu Fu's anger surged as he roared at the top of his lungs. He held the golden sword with both hands and slashed at Ji Tianxing. Dragon soaring to the ninth heaven. With a wave of the golden holy sword, 2 golden dragon shadows soared into the sky and let out dragon roars that pierced through gold and cracked stone. Boom. The 2 golden dragons rushed into the night sky, illuminating a radius of hundreds of miles. Their power was terrifying to the extreme. The golden dragons swooped down from the sky, carrying the power to destroy everything and fiercely bombarded Ji Tianxing. In the face of such a destructive attack, Ji Tianxing could only use the Burial of Heaven sword to block it. But he stood in the same place, motionless, and had no intention of fighting back. He looked at Yu Fu with a playful gaze and a smile at the corner of his mouth. He seemed to have a card up his sleeve and was very wise. In the next moment, the 2 golden dragons were about to hit Ji Tianxing. A crisp, cold, angry shout suddenly rang out in the night sky. "Stop!" As this majestic cold shout sounded, a giant golden palm the size of a mountain suddenly tore through the night sky and grabbed at the 2 golden dragons. Bang! In the blink of an eye, the giant golden palm grabbed the 2 golden dragon phantoms and crushed them. Boom! Golden fragments fell from the sky and drowned Ji Tianxing's figure. He stood in the night sky with a calm expression, bathed in the snowflake-like golden fragments, with a calm, confident and proud posture. Such a scene caused countless officers and soldiers to be dumbstruck, and they were filled with shock and admiration. Chapter 2068. The golden light fragments scattered in the night sky, and the giant golden palm dissipated. A white light flew from afar and arrived at the top of the mountain. After the white light dissipated, 5 figures appeared. 4 of them were tall men in armor. They were at the 6th or 7th level of the Crossing Calamity Realm. The 4 of them were obviously the generals of Sky Lion Pass. However, they were not the generals under Yu Fu's command. They came from the West Mountain. The leader was a young woman in a white palace dress. She had a slim figure. She was 7 feet tall and wore an exquisite palace dress. She wore a crown with a golden Wan Phoenix gem inlaid with jade. She exuded a noble and elegant aura. She was so powerful that people could only look at her from afar and did not dare to have any blasphemous thoughts. Her face was exquisite and beautiful, but it was not seductive at all. She had a cold and majestic aura. It was obvious that she was the one who had crushed the 2 golden dragons with the giant golden palm. She stood proudly in the night sky and looked down at everyone. There was a hint of anger between her eyebrows. She exuded a cold aura. In an instant, the entire mountain peak fell silent. Countless soldiers looked up at the sky, their faces filled with awe and veneration. After being stunned for a moment, everyone bowed in unison and shouted respectfully, "Welcome, Holy Emperor." There was no doubt that the beautiful woman in the palace dress was the Holy Emperor of the Kingdom of Baishuang, Lu Baishuang. Yu Fu, who was originally angry, suddenly changed his expression when he saw Lu Baishuang. He quickly suppressed his anger and flew in front of Lu Baishuang. He bowed respectfully. "Greetings, Holy Emperor." Holy Emperor Baishuang glanced at him expressionlessly. Then she looked at Ji Tianxing, who was not far away. She couldn't help but frown when she saw Ji Tianxing standing in the night sky with an indifferent expression. He didn't show the slightest bit of respect, nor did he show any signs of bowing. "Who are you? Why are you fighting in my Sky Lion Pass?" When Ji Tianxing heard her words and saw her expression, he guessed that she already knew the inside story. He asked this question even though he already knew the answer. If Lu Baishuang really treated him as an enemy, there was no need to stop Yu Fu. He could just kill him directly. Thinking of this, Ji Tianxing smiled faintly and said, Holy Emperor Bai Shuang is extremely intelligent. Why do you need to ask me? As for the reason, you can ask Deputy Commander Yu. Yu Fu was full of anger and wanted to complain to Lu Baishuang. Hearing Ji Tianxing's words, he sneered in his heart. Damned brat, you asked for it. Hence, Yu Fu hurriedly clasped his hands and reporting to the Saint Emperor, this person is called Ji Tianxing. He claims to be a disciple of the Luotian mountain range. The moment he arrived at the Heavenly Lion Pass, he requested to see you. He claimed that he was ordered by the Divine Lord to be the deputy commander of the Heavenly Lion Pass. The Saint Emperor was far away in White Mountain City dealing with government affairs. How busy was he? How could anyone meet him? Of course, I didn't believe it, so I sent someone to send him away. Yu Fu recounted the events that happened previously from beginning to end. Of course, if he changed his statement slightly, he would make himself an innocent person and cast away all the responsibility. As for Ji Tianxing, he became a lawless, cruel and tyrannical villain. Lu Baishuang listened to his narration without any expression. Occasionally he would glance at Ji Tianxing's reaction. Ji Tianxing only listened calmly without any intention to argue. After Yu Fu finished, he pointed at Ji Tianxing and said to Lu Baishuang, Saint Emperor, fortunately you came in time. Otherwise, this person would have injured me and destroyed the entire Heavenly Lion Pass. At that time, the consequences would be unimaginable. Lu Baishuang looked at Ji Tianxing calmly and asked, Ji Tianxing, is what Yu Fu said true? Ji Tianxing sneered disdainfully. Right or wrong, Saint Emperor Baishuang naturally knows the answer in your heart. Why bother asking? The truth of the matter is clear to the generals around you. Why don't you ask them? Yu Fu's expression changed immediately. He pointed at him and shouted, Ji Tianxing, how dare you be so disrespectful to Lord Saint Emperor? Men, take this arrogant person down. Originally, he was worried that Ji Tianxing would cry and plead to Lu Baishuang, and this matter would be left unsettled. But he didn't expect Ji Tianxing to be so arrogant. He didn't even put Lu Baishuang in his eyes. This was exactly what he wanted, and he was very pleased with himself. However, when he gave the order, no one dared to move. Yu Fu was embarrassed. Lu Baishuang turned to look at Yu Fu. His expression gradually turned cold and he shouted in a dignified tone, Deputy Commander Yu, Ji Tianxing is a disciple of Luotian Mountain, the #1 god disciple of Luotian Kingdom. In terms of status, he can stand shoulder to shoulder with this emperor. Even if he is disrespectful, it is understandable. If you are so eager to convict him, what do you think of this emperor? Yu Fu was dumbfounded. He stared at Lu Baishuang with wide eyes. He didn't expect that Ji Tianxing wouldn't say a word, but Lu Baishuang would take the initiative to defend him. Yu Fu came back to his senses and hurriedly said, Saint Emperor, even if Ji Tianxing's status is noble, he is truly lawless and cruel. He injured so many soldiers. Before he could finish, Lu Baishuang shouted angrily, Shut up. Deputy Commander Yu, in front of so many people, you still want to distort the truth? What exactly happened? Don't tell me you still need this emperor to repeat it. Yu Fu's expression became even uglier, but he was unwilling. He pointed at Ji Tianxing and said, But Saint Emperor, he injured so many soldiers and destroyed the entire scout camp. This is the truth. Lu Baishuang's eyes became colder and colder. He shouted in a dignified tone, Deputy Commander Yu, if you didn't deliberately suppress and frame Ji Tianxing, how could he have retaliated? Many soldiers were injured and the scout camp was destroyed. It was all because of you. Before this emperor left, I told you that Ji Tianxing was about to arrive at Sky Lion Pass. I told you to receive him well and hand over the military affairs. There can be no mistakes. What about you? Is this the explanation you gave to this emperor? Is this how you completed the mission I gave you? Yu Fu, you have disappointed this emperor too much. Lu Baishuang's voice spread throughout the entire area, shaking the night sky. An invisible pressure enveloped the entire Sky Lion Pass. The million soldiers heard it clearly and their hearts were filled with awe. They didn't dare to make any noise. Yu Fu's expression was also extremely ugly. His forehead was covered in cold sweat. He shouted in his heart, How can this be? That brat is so arrogant that he didn't even bother to explain. Lu Baishuang didn't dare to criticize him and even reprimand me in front of everyone? Yu Fu couldn't understand. He was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. At this moment something happened that made his eyes pop out. Lu Baishuang walked in front of Ji Tianxing and bowed in a dignified manner. He said with an apologetic face, "Young Master Ji, this emperor was busy with government affairs and neglected to receive you. This caused this misunderstanding. I feel very guilty and uneasy. Please forgive me, young Master Ji." You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.